Chapter 121, The Dementor Disappearance Case and Jealousy. In the principal's office, Dumbledore was experiencing a headache, exacerbated by the presence of Cornelius Fudge, the pot-bellied minister for magic. Fudge, donning his bowler hat, raised his voice slightly. Who else, if not you, could make 3 Dementors vanish without leaving a trace? The disappearance of the Dementors had placed Dumbledore at the top of the Ministry of Magic's list of suspects. Given the headmaster's well-known aversion to Dementors, Fudge couldn't conceive of anyone else capable of such a feat. The relationship between the Dementors of Azkaban and the Ministry was one of mutual benefit rather than subordination. The Ministry supplied prisoners for the Dementors to feed on, and in return, the Dementors guarded those prisoners. The disappearance of the Dementors was a critical issue. If not resolved, it could lead to a strike and potentially allow the prisoners of Azkaban to escape, a scenario Fudge was desperate to avoid during his tenure. Dumbledore, feeling somewhat exasperated, waved his hand dismissively. Cornelius, it's possible that others besides me could achieve this, and there might be spells other than the Patronus charm capable of eliminating a Dementor. Fudge, struck by a terrifying thought, exclaimed, Impossible! We all know he can't have returned. The mere possibility sent shivers down his spine, but then another thought struck him, and he said with renewed conviction, It must be Sirius Black. He's the one lurking around, killing Dementors. His voice grew louder, as if trying to convince himself of this theory, until he finally stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind him. Watching Fudge's departure, Dumbledore sighed inwardly, reflecting on how much had changed. Fudge hadn't always been this way. Dumbledore had once supported him, helping him rise to the position of Minister for Magic. However, it seemed that power and comfort had made Fudge timid. Dumbledore had believed that the wizarding world needed stability, but in hindsight, he wondered if he had made the right choice in supporting Fudge, who continued to deny the possibility of Voldemort's return. Power should not be wielded as a personal weapon, Dumbledore mused. He knew that if he showed even the slightest interest, his old friends, former students, the Ministry of Magic, the Wizengamot, and indeed the entire magical world would rally to make him Minister for Magic. But Dumbledore understood his own nature. He was pure, powerful, brave, and principled, yet he knew he must steer clear of power, for it was a poison that could corrupt him. Reflecting on his past, Dumbledore recalled his association with the man who would become the first Dark Lord to challenge the Statute of Secrecy. He recognized that his own influence had played a part in that dark chapter. Thus, even during the most dangerous times, he had always refrained from seeking power. Gazing at the small golden funnel on his desk, Dumbledore seemed to be speaking both to himself and to an unseen listener. "I hope you're not like that," he whispered. Before him, he envisioned 2 figures, a vibrant young man and a handsome student in a Hogwarts uniform, his face obscured by a mask. As their images merged, a 3rd figure appeared, but Dumbledore's aging eyes could only discern the silhouette. "The possibilities are endless," Dumbledore murmured, his gaze shifting to the Sorting Hat and the Sword of Gryffindor. He recognized the parallels and differences between himself and the figure he imagined. As he contemplated his own mortality, he wondered, is a phoenix too old to rise from the ashes? John's second encounter with Fudge, the Minister of Magic, was as awkward as the first. Fudge's expression was sour, reminiscent of someone who had just tasted the Weasley twins' latest concoction, the Canary Cream. His displeasure was palpable, and he muttered under his breath, with "serious" being one of the few discernible words. John could only shrug at the sight. It seemed Fudge had once a gag, and found himself at odds with Dumbledore. Upon returning to the Slytherin common room, John noticed another sour face, this time belonging to Daphne. Her usually composed features were twisted in annoyance, hinting at a temper simmering beneath the surface. As someone who often relied on Daphne's assistance in class, John approached her with concern. "What's the matter? Did Tom mess up your notes again?" he inquired, recalling a previous incident where Tom's carelessness had caused Daphne considerable frustration. Daphne's response was laced with sarcasm, her voice unnaturally high-pitched, which sent shivers down John's spine. "Thank you, John," she drawled, her gratitude clearly forced. John, feeling a bit uneasy, simply nodded and attempted to smooth things over by promising to have Tom perform tricks as a form of apology. The following day, John had a plan to cheer Daphne up. He whispered to her during breakfast, inviting her to join him on the covered bridge, a secluded spot known for its tranquility. Daphne, intrigued and hopeful, followed John, leaving her friend Pansy behind with a knowing smile. The morning sun cast a warm glow over the bridge, highlighting John's features and stirring something in Daphne's heart. She hesitated before asking John what he had in store for her, her voice betraying her anticipation. John, sensing her excitement, smiled reassuringly. "I know you've been upset, and I wanted to make it up to you," he said, locking eyes with her. The moment was charged with an unspoken connection, but before Daphne could respond, John snapped his fingers and music filled the air. "Watch this," John announced with a grin. "Tom has been practicing just for you, to make amends in his own way." He gestured towards Tom, the dog, who was preparing to perform a handstand while eating his meal upside down. The sight was both amusing and endearing, and John cheered Tom on enthusiastically, encouraging him to complete the trick. For a moment, the atmosphere was filled with laughter and lightheartedness, a stark contrast to the tension that had preceded it. John's effort to lighten the mood and Daphne's willingness to be entertained by Tom's antics hinted at a deeper bond between them, one that went beyond mere classmates. As the sound of flags waving and shouts filled the air, Daphne's shy demeanor transformed into a frosty one, her gaze fixed on Tom, who was fervently engaged in his task, and a sneer curled the corners of her mouth. "Impressive, isn't it?" John observed Tom's clean plate with a sense of satisfaction. Daphne's laugh was cold and mocking. "Thank you, John," she said, her voice taking on a sinister, high-pitched tone that made the sentence sound strangely awkward. John scratched his head, puzzled by the odd feeling the interaction left him with. He ventured cautiously, "You know, Tom can also do a one-handed handstand while eating dog food." "Thank you, John." Daphne repeated the phrase, turning on her heel and walking away before John could grasp the meaning of her words. He watched her leave, then turned his attention to Tom, who was now excitedly wagging his tail around him. "You've got it all wrong," John exclaimed, a hint of realization in his voice. Daphne paused, momentarily thinking John had caught on to her sarcasm, but she quickly dismissed the thought. John, still oblivious, lamented, "I've eaten double the amount of dog food these days, yet I haven't seen any growth." Tom, caught in the act, wore a guilty expression and lowered his head. Meanwhile, Daphne's departure was marked by heavy footsteps, each step a silent rebuke aimed at John. She was incredulous that John could note the quantity of dog food Tom consumed, but remained clueless about the real reason behind her disdain. Chapter 122, Quidditch Training Week and Borrowing Books. John had always oscillated between being meticulous and negligent. It took him 3 days in Daphne's company before he vaguely recalled where he had heard a particular phrase. "Didn't Hermione mention that on my birthday?" he pondered, slightly dazed. The familiarity of the statement puzzled him until he realized Hermione had been the one to say it. "Does she think I shouldn't give gifts to Gryffindors?" Upon reflection, John considered this a significant issue. As the leader of Slytherin's informal group, his actions had already altered Slytherin's stance towards Muggles and Half-Bloods considerably. However, the traditional rivalry with Gryffindor remained unchanged. It seemed almost ingrained in their bones that Slytherin and Gryffindor were destined to be at odds, and John was no exception. With this realization, John concluded that his actions were justified. Friendship had predated house divisions, and his loyalty to Slytherin was unwavering. He humorously thought to himself, "I'm not betraying my house. I've been wrongfully accused." After much internal debate, John decided he owed Daphne an apology, especially since their disagreement had caused him to miss a class on Muggle studies. Approaching Daphne, he earnestly said, "I realize I've been in the wrong recently, and I want to apologize." His sincerity caught Daphne off guard, softening her initial resentment. "I share some of the blame. I shouldn't have reacted the way I did," she admitted, feeling embarrassed about her behavior over the past few days. John, understanding her discomfort, tried to lighten the mood with a joke. "It's like having Professor Snape around," he said, attempting to mimic the professor's stern demeanor. Daphne's shocked expression puzzled John. Was comparing someone to Professor Snape really that surprising? Before he could ponder further, a chilling voice interrupted. "Mr. Wick, I suggest you seek approval from someone else." Startled, John turned to find Professor Snape, clad in his black robes, smirking disdainfully at him. Attempting to diffuse the tension, John blurted out, "Hi, Professor. I was just commenting on how distinguished you look." The lie was so blatant that even Daphne struggled to keep a straight face, while Snape's expression barely concealed his irritation. Dropping a note, Snape swiftly departed. John's heart sank as he realized any positive rapport he had built with Snape might have just evaporated. Picking up the note, he saw it was signed by Snape himself. What does this mean? John wondered, confused by Snape's cryptic actions. Despite the awkward encounter, John now had the approval slip he needed. His recent preoccupation with Dementor research had kept him from visiting the restricted section of the library, but with the slip in hand, he was eager to delve into the forbidden tomes. Meanwhile, Daphne, left behind, could only stomp her foot in frustration. October brought with it the usual excellence of the Defense Against the Dark Arts class. John had to admit, despite his skills, he couldn't match Professor Lupin's teaching prowess. It's remarkable that he's still teaching. The young wizards in the werewolf community could learn a lot from him, John mused, admiring Lupin's ability to engage and educate his students in a manner that was both informative and enjoyable. John had a habit of fidgeting with objects in his hand, often his wand or a ring if he wore one. He joked to himself that his wand would probably be worn down by the time he graduated. In divination class, John added, John's academic performance was exceptional, earning him high praise from Professor Trelawney, who affectionately began calling him Darling. His success extended to the Conservation of Magizoology class, where, despite initial challenges, John managed to resolve all issues, much to everyone's relief. Draco Malfoy, influenced by John's guidance, showed remarkable improvement and refrained from complaining to his father about the class's difficulties. Hagrid, D, in his quest to impress, often sought out enchanting creatures like pretty flower fairies, which delighted the students, especially the girls. However, he also considered introducing less menacing magical animals, which, although they seemed mundane to him, were well received by the students. John humorously challenged Hagrid's ambitious idea of bringing a fire dragon to class, highlighting the creature's danger even to adult wizards, let alone students. This led to a playful banter between them, with John ultimately dissuading Hagrid from pursuing such a risky endeavor. At the Quidditch pitch, the atmosphere was vibrant, with students from all four houses practicing diligently, regardless of the weather. Hufflepuff, under the new captaincy of Cedric Diggory, who had honed his skills with John the previous year, showed impressive agility and skill, particularly in maneuvers that belied his tall stature. Cedric warmly greeted John, who responded with an encouraging gesture before heading to the library's restricted section. In his quest for knowledge, John borrowed a book titled The Origin and Speculation of Dementors, a choice that surprised Mrs. Pintz, the librarian. Despite her initial reservations, she was swayed by John's charm and curiosity. Before leaving, John's mention of enjoying the ice cream he had sent her, particularly the unique flavor reminiscent of mapo tofu, left Mrs. Pintz pleasantly surprised, revealing her unexpected taste preferences. Passing by the Quidditch pitch once more, John observed the intense practice sessions, now dominated by Gryffindor's team. Oliver Wood's leadership and Harry Potter's relentless pursuit of the snitch, along with the Weasley twins' innovative tactics, showcased the team's determination. Despite Wood's reluctance to have a Slytherin spectator, John, understanding his position, left without protest, acknowledging his own constraints that prevented him from joining the Quidditch team. Reflecting on his busy schedule, John wished for a way to control time, recognizing the complexity and taboo surrounding such magic in the wizarding world. Back in the Gryffindor common room, he eagerly delved into The Origin and Speculation of Dementors, intrigued by the book's initial assertion that a Dementor represents a fusion of soul and matter. This revelation aligned with John's own observations and experiments with Dementors, sparking his interest to explore the subject further. John's gaze was fixed on the book, his mind racing with thoughts. The the revelation before him was both shocking and intriguing. Dementors, those cruel and pitiful creatures, possessed only a fraction of intelligence and were incapable of reproduction. This information led John to an unexpected comparison: the basilisk. Unlike dementors, basilisks were the result of human intervention, a deliberate selection and manipulation of genes from nature. But dementors were an entirely different case. The book speculated that dementors were not natural creatures, but rather creations of humans. They lacked gender and the concept of reproduction, existing more like wraiths, emerging from dark and decaying places as if they were fungi. This notion sent a shiver down John's spine, prompting him to wonder about the kind of person who would create such a horrifying entity as a dementor. With a sense of dread, John continued to read, his curiosity overcoming his apprehension. The text revealed that the creator of the dementors was an exceedingly malevolent being, the first resident of Azkaban, Alexis. This discovery left John with more questions than answers. What drove Alexis to create such monstrous beings? How did this act tie into the history of Azkaban, a place already shrouded in darkness and despair? The implications were vast, suggesting a depth of evil and manipulation that went beyond what John had previously understood about the wizarding world's darker corners. As he delved deeper into the book, John realized that understanding the origins of the Dementors was crucial. It was not just about satisfying High's curiosity, but about uncovering a piece of the puzzle that was the complex tapestry of magical history. The creation of Dementors by Alexis, a figure now etched in his mind as the epitome of darkness, was a testament to the lengths some would go to wield power and instill fear. Determined to learn more, John turned the page, his resolve strengthened. The story of the Dementors and their creator was a grim reminder of the potential for evil within the wizarding world, but it also served as a call to action. Knowledge was power, and John was intent on uncovering the truth, no matter how unsettling it might be. Chapter 123, The Enigmatic Hermione and Level 5 Alchemy. The creation of a Dementor can be distilled into two essential components, a soul and a curse. Extus, known for his cruelty, mercilessly slaughtered numerous muggles. The souls of his victims, cursed and unable to find peace, were trapped in a limbo between reality and illusion, neither fully dead nor alive. Over time, these tormented souls transformed into Dementors, creatures that prey on the souls of the living. If there were a hierarchy of evil, Extus would undoubtedly occupy the highest tier, John mused, aligning with the author's sentiment. The notion of crafting Dementors from tortured souls was a concept so dark that even John, with all his capabilities, found it abhorrent. A sudden realization struck him, prompting a moment of introspection. Wait, why am I even contemplating this? He questioned himself, bewildered. I consider myself a good person. Even in the future, should I rise to power, I aim to be known as the White Demon King, not a Dark Lord. My intentions are far removed from evil. With a sigh, John closed the book. It had not only detailed the process of creating Dementors, but also chronicled the heinous acts and history of Extus. Unlike Voldemort, who killed for dominion over the wizarding world, Extus embodied pure, unadulterated evil, acting without rhyme or reason, a true paragon of madness. Thankfully, he met an early demise. Otherwise, even Voldemort would have paled in comparison, John reflected, relieved at the thought of Extus's early departure from the world. October brought a palpable sense of excitement to the third-year students, stirred by the upcoming Halloween and the opportunity to visit Hogsmeade Village. Renowned as the only all-wizarding village in the country, Hogsmeade boasted a variety of magical shops and attractions, such as Honeyduke's Candy Store and Zonko's Joke Shop, that were eagerly discussed among the students. John, however, found himself torn. While the allure of Hogsmeade was undeniable, his commitment to perfecting his surgical skills weighed heavily on his mind. The fate of Nagini, whose soul flickered like a candle in the wind, was uncertain. The unicorn horn's efficacy was dwindling, and time was of the essence. The operation must be prioritized, he resolved, driven not only by the promise of rewards, but by his academic pursuits and a promise made to a friend. Upon entering the Slytherin common room, John was greeted by the sight of Tom sneaking out with dog food. Is he seeing someone with a dog? John pondered, his curiosity piqued. Yet he quickly dismissed the thought. realizing the unlikely presence of other dogs besides his own. Navigating his demanding schedule, John found himself stretched thin, juggling multiple classes simultaneously. The pressure to maintain his top-ranking status, coupled with the challenge of attending overlapping classes, was nearly overwhelming. One morning, running late, John encountered Hermione, who seemed equally rushed. "You're taking classes too? Oh, right, you've enrolled in all of them," he remarked. "Sorry, John, I can't talk. I'm going to be late," Hermione replied hastily, darting away. John watched her leave, puzzled. The class hadn't started yet, and her direction suggested she was skipping divination. Arriving at the divination classroom, John was taken aback to find Hermione already seated. He scanned the room, unable to recall seeing her enter. How is this possible? Even John, with all his knowledge and experience, found himself at a loss. After one class ended, John noticed Hermione rushing out with a sense of urgency. A moment later, he encountered her again around the corner. Hermione appeared somewhat fatigued, her pace significantly quicker than usual. John, puzzled, stroked his chin thoughtfully. Why does Hermione seem so off? He wondered. This wasn't the first time he had observed her acting strangely around class time. The most baffling part was his curiosity about how Hermione managed to attend 3 classes simultaneously. Could she possess a similar remote monitoring ability, or even know the art of cloning, he mused. Resolving to pay closer attention in the future, John headed to his next class. Upon arriving, he was surprised to find Hermione there as well, which deepened his suspicion. Could someone be using Polyjuice Potion to impersonate her, or is Hermione using some form of teleportation within the castle? To verify his theory, John discreetly retrieved the Marauder's map. As he unfolded it, he was taken aback. "Why are there 3 Hermiones?" he muttered in disbelief. The map displayed one Hermione in the divination classroom, with the other 2 in arithmetic and Muggle studies. Overwhelmed, John realized Hermione must have mastered some form of cloning technique. "If only she had shared this ability earlier, it would have saved me so much effort," he lamented. After class, John confronted Hermione. "Do you know how to clone yourself?" he inquired, noticing the confusion on her face. Doubting his initial guess, he pressed on. "How do you manage to attend 3 classes at once?" Hermione, momentarily caught off guard, remembered Professor McGonagall's warning about keeping secrets. She quickly composed herself and replied, "I have my methods, John. Please, don't ask." John, though skeptical, accepted her response. "It seems to be a closely guarded secret," he concluded, feeling somewhat foolish for his earlier assumptions. He suspected that Hermione was bound by a promise to Dumbledore or Professor McGonagall, preventing her from sharing her secret. "It appears there's a bit of favoritism from the professors," John mused, dismissing the matter. "What need do I have for their secrets when I have my alchemy?" Eager to improve his skills, John retreated to the secret chamber after class to enhance his alchemy. Achieving level 5, he realized further advancement would require more knowledge. Proud of his mastery, John surveyed the Slytherin chamber, contemplating its cleanliness. Why not modify it? It's quite a hassle to access it through the Forbidden Forest daily, he thought, considering the convenience of a direct entrance to avoid encounters with centaurs, thanks to his proficiency in illusion spells. Deciding to act on his idea, John began to remodel the chamber's entrance. With his current level of alchemy, he felt confident in his ability to transform it without dismantling the original structure. After some work, a new door materialized, complete with an access code for easy entry. He even modified the entrance in the girls' bathroom, setting a spell that only he could activate with the password, "The stars are eternal." Exiting through the newly created door, John found himself in the girls' bathroom, thankfully empty at the time, likely due to Myrtle's frequent presence. As he emerged, Myrtle, wearing the card John had given her, greeted him in surprise. "Did you come to see John?" Found himself in an awkward conversation with moaning Myrtle, the ghost who haunted the girls' bathroom at Hogwarts. He had stumbled upon the entrance to a secret room, and not wanting to reveal his accidental discovery, he greeted Myrtle with a forced, "long time no see." Myrtle, visibly delighted by the attention, quickly began to share her recent endeavors. She excitedly told John about how she had tried to impress the other ghosts with a card trick, but to her dismay, they remained unimpressed, which had infuriated her. Among the ghosts, nearly headless Nick expressed his envy towards Myrtle's interaction with John. He lamented his inability to join the headless hunt due to his partially attached head and half-jokingly asked John if he would be willing to sever the remaining skin. This request only highlighted the ghosts' longing for change, no matter how small, to break the monotony of their eternal existence. As the conversation continued, Myrtle hinted at wanting a gift from John, perhaps a necklace or a pair of glasses that weren't as thick as the ones she currently wore. John, trying to maintain his politeness, explained that such materials weren't easy to come by, subtly discouraging her from the idea of changing her appearance. Myrtle, understanding the difficulty, reluctantly abandoned the thought of acquiring a new dress or accessory. John couldn't help but feel that the ghosts of Hogwarts, despite being centuries old, still craved change and excitement, much like the living. Their desires for new experiences and even the simple wish to alter their appearance were reminders of their once human nature. As he navigated this unexpected interaction, John realized the complexity of the ghostly residents of Hogwarts, their unfulfilled desires, and their continuous search for a semblance of the life they once had. Chapter 124, Crafting the Chamber of Secrets and Astoria's Return to the Room of Requirement. John found himself deep in thought upon entering the Room of Requirement once more. The idea of creating a secret chamber crossed his mind. He reflected on the founders of Hogwarts, each having their own secret room. If he were to establish the Quunction Club, wouldn't it require a special place of its own? Given his proficiency in alchemy, enhancing the room with advanced runes to create a secret chamber seemed well within his capabilities. As of now, the Stars Club had only 2 official members, excluding those not currently at the school, Fu Rong and Heinrich. John had already identified 3 potential candidates for membership: Percy from Gryffindor, Malfoy from Slytherin, and Neville Longbottom. Percy, a seeker of glory and academic excellence with 12 certificates to his name, was seen as a key to John's future interactions with the Ministry of Magic. Malfoy, despite his less-than-stellar reputation, was a pureblood from one of the 28 sacred families, offering valuable connections and leverage against Voldemort in the future. Neville, destined to be one of the few able to wield the Sword of Gryffindor alongside Dumbledore, also had a high potential for greatness. John also considered Daphne and Hermione, though he doubted Hermione would leave Harry's side, given her loyalty and the influence of Dumbledore on the trio. Cedric Diggory was another possibility, admired among the Hufflepuffs for his strength and popularity, though John had yet to establish a strong connection with him. After deliberating on the potential members, John decided to focus on constructing the secret chamber before extending any invitations. He left the Room of Requirement, determined to gather the necessary materials for the chamber, aiming for a standard befitting the Stars Club's ambitions. John sought Hagrid's assistance in acquiring mostly wooden materials, to which Hagrid heartily agreed, though he seemed eager for John to leave, casting a curious glance at Fang as he departed. John found Hagrid's behavior odd, especially considering his usual companionship with Fang. In the days that followed, John's whereabouts often remained a mystery, even to Malfoy. Meanwhile, Professor Lupin's exceptional teaching skills greatly improved the defense against the dark arts classes, filling the gap left by previous years. As Halloween approached, the castle buzzed with excitement, seemingly unaffected by the threat of Sirius Black at large. The Dementors outside, however, were drawn to the joy emanating from Hogwarts, becoming increasingly agitated. In the Gryffindor common room, a dispute erupted when Hermione's cat, Crookshanks, attacked Ron's rat, Scabbers, leading to a heated argument between Ron and Hermione. Harry found himself caught in the middle, unsure of what to say. The Quidditch pitch remained a hub of activity, with Oliver Wood cautioning Harry about Cedric Diggory's prowess. Harry, however, was preoccupied with his friend's quarrel. The next day, Lavender Brown was distraught over the death of her rabbit, which coincidentally occurred on October 10th, the date John had ominously predicted in a divination class. This revelation left the students bewildered, pondering the accuracy of John's prediction and its implications. A shiver of horror ran down everyone's spines as they contemplated the implications of John's successful prophecies. John had entered a prophetic state twice during divination class, once when he spoke of the full moon and another time on October 10th. With one prophecy already proven true, the question loomed, would the other also come to pass? Those who are ignorant of the truth will suffer broken lower legs, and those who defy the taboo will be engulfed by the black tide. Ernie recited the prophecy with a grave expression. I believe this could be about Harry Potter. Hannah Abbott, puzzled, inquired, why Harry Potter? Ernie explained as if it were obvious. Haven't you noticed? Whenever something bad happens, Harry always seems to be involved. It's as if he's a magnet for disaster. Even Seamus nodded in agreement, which only served to distress Harry further. The notion of being a disaster magnet was unsettling. Hermione's face fell. She might have dismissed Professor Trelawney's predictions as mere coincidences, but coming from a friend, the prophecy seemed all too credible. Attempting to offer some comfort to Lavender Brown, she said, "These are just coincidences, right? I mean, you've always been worried about your rabbit being caught by a fox, haven't you?" The mention of the rabbit made Lavender want to burst into tears. Shaking her head, she replied, "No, I'm just scared it will die." Hermione, perplexed, asked, "Is the rabbit very old?" "No, it's a baby bunny," Lavender responded. Hermione was at a loss for words. The fear for a baby bunny's life seemed to inadvertently confirm the ominous nature of John's prophecy. Even Harry began to wonder if the prophecy was about him, especially after his own foreboding encounter with a black dog. While Gryffindor House was engulfed in anxiety, Slytherin House seemed to revel in the situation. The allure of Hogsmeade was undeniable, especially for young wizards from magical families. This was the third time Malfoy had regaled John with the romantic tale of his parents in Hogsmeade, much to John's chagrin. As class ended, Professor Snape announced that permission slips for the Hogsmeade trip needed to be submitted before Halloween. Daphne approached John, her earlier anger forgotten, and asked with genuine curiosity, "John, are you planning to go to Hogsmeade?" "I should be," John replied. Noticing a younger girl beside Daphne, John inquired, "And who might this be?" Daphne introduced her with pride. "This is my sister, Astoria, a first year in Slytherin, who just enrolled this year." Astoria, in her Slytherin uniform, bore a striking resemblance to her sister Daphne, with blonde hair and a more demure demeanor. She looked at John with curiosity and said, "You're John Wick, aren't you? My sister talks about you a lot." Daphne, caught off guard and blushing, quickly silenced Astoria before she could say more and hurried her away, fearing further revelations. John shook his head, amused by the encounter. He knew he needed to accelerate the construction of the secret room. Malfoy approached, curiosity evident in his expression. "Who was that girl just now?" he asked. John, seeing Malfoy's interest, replied nonchalantly, "Daphne's sister. And by the way, give me back my badge." Malfoy, clutching the badge to his chest with a hint of regret, lamented, "I only took a quick look. Had I known, I wouldn't have risked losing my badge over it." John gave him a dismissive look. "I'm just making sure you don't lose it in Hogsmeade. Let me keep it safe for now." "Okay," Malfoy agreed, though still skeptical. John took the badge, planning to enhance it with a new feature to access the Star Society, effectively upgrading the system. Heinrich arrived, signaling the next phase of their adventure. With an unsightly scab marring his otherwise pale and handsome face, Heinrich looked a sight. "You fought the twins again?" John inquired, his gaze fixed on the blemish. Raising his hand, he brushed it lightly over the scab. The ugly mark gradually shrank and eventually vanished altogether. A fleeting sensation of coldness passed over Heinrich's face, replaced quickly by a look of surprise. His voice, grim and resolute, carried a promise of retribution. "Sooner or later, I will make them suffer 1,000-fold for what they've done." John raised his eyebrows at the intensity of Heinrich's hatred. It was clear that the twins had made a formidable enemy, and they would be wise to seek divine protection. The depth of Heinrich's animosity suggested that this feud was far from over, and the consequences could be dire for those involved. Chapter 125, The Establishment of the Kungsing Club and the Formation of the Grassroots Team. Time flew by, and John found himself immensely satisfied with the star-filled dome he had constructed. The secret chamber, intended to be the first-generation headquarters of the Stars Society, was nearing completion. It was a testament to the convenience of magic. A project that would have taken Muggles months or even a year to complete was accomplished in far less time. The addition of magic is crucial, John mused to himself as he meticulously engraved the magic circuit onto the chamber's structure. Utilizing magic crystals as a power source, he embedded 36 of them into the chamber, each shining like a star in the night sky. He estimated that unless figures of Voldemort or Dumbledore's caliber intervened, no one could tamper with these crystals. The circuit he inscribed was no ordinary spell, but a complex ritual drawing upon ancient magic and runes. Upon completion, the entire chamber was bathed in a magical glow, a sight only John witnessed. The activated circuits and floating runes imbued the space with an ethereal quality. The interior of the Kwungsing Club was breathtaking. Beneath the starry dome sat a round table with 9 seats, surrounded by mysterious violet tapestries and silver utensils. The emblems projected from the dome marked each seat, while objects resembling galaxies spun around the room, adding to its mystique. With the secret chamber complete, John sought a suitable location for it. He recalled the unused room where the Philosopher's Stone had once been kept as an ideal spot. Implementing a teleportation device, he transformed an ordinary wooden door into a gateway to 2 distinct spaces, the original room and the secret chamber of the Star Society. Additionally, he cleverly situated the Chamber of Secrets within Slytherin's own, sparing him further visits to the girls' bathroom and achieving a dual purpose. Upon the chamber's completion, John summoned his chosen members. Cedric's presence was a pleasant surprise. "I'm curious about the community you've created," Cedric admitted, his admiration for John's dueling prowess well known. "What do you want from me?" Malfoy asked, unusually without his cronies. Alongside him were Heinrich, shadow-like as ever, and Neville, who seemed unsure of his solo invitation. Percy appeared puzzled by John's intentions, while Daphne, a top student alongside John and Hermione, accepted her invitation with curiosity. In total, 7 individuals, including John, formed the grassroots team of the Kwungsing Club. With a proud smile, John welcomed them. "Welcome to the Star Club." At the mention of the club's name, Malfoy's excitement was palpable, his semester-long struggles finally earning him a place. As the group entered the stunning room beneath the star-filled dome, Daphne gasped at its beauty, and Percy wondered when Hogwarts had acquired such a space. "The Star Club welcomes all friends," John began, his voice sincere. "We chase glory, help friends, and share strength. We may not be relatives, but we are closer than many. The stars are eternal and unchanging." "Are you willing to join the Star Club?" he asked. Without hesitation, Heinrich stepped forward, his voice filled with fervor. "Heinrich Edgar, willing to join." Following him, Daphne stepped up, her voice serious yet soft. "Daphne Greengrass, willing to join." One by one, each member expressed their willingness to join, drawn together by a shared pursuit of strength and camaraderie under the eternal stars of the Kwungsing Club. Daphne Greengrass stepped forward with determination, declaring, "Greengrass, willing to join." Not to be outshone, Draco Malfoy followed suit, placing his right hand over his heart and stating earnestly, "Draco Malfoy, willing to join." Among the remaining 3, 2 from Gryffindor and 1 from Hufflepuff, Percy Weasley finally understood John's intentions. The ambition he witnessed sparked a gleam in his eyes. Treasuring his badge of the Student Council President, he removed it, roared Malfoy's salute, and announced, "Percy Weasley, willing to join." Cedric Diggory, under his breath, remarked, "I knew you had more up your sleeve." He stepped forward with a smile and added, "Cedric Diggory, willing to join." Now, all eyes turned to Neville Longbottom. John addressed him gently. "Neville, there's no pressure." After a moment of hesitation, Neville stepped forward, his voice stronger due to his recent growth in both stature and confidence. "Neville Longbottom, willing to join." The 6 of them bowed their heads as John raised his hand towards the dome above. 6 stars descended from the celestial expanse, transforming into shining badges adorned with purple crystals that seemed to contain miniature starry skies. John affixed a badge to each of them, marking the official formation of their group. Gazing at the 6 individuals before him, John thought to himself, "This is a significant step forward." He envisioned a future where, Even if their group, the Stars Club, couldn't rival the Order of the Phoenix, it would still emerge as a formidable force within the wizarding world. John then conjured 7 golden cups on the table, each flying to its respective new member. As he lifted his cup, filled with a sense of camaraderie reminiscent of legendary heroes, he was about to down his drink in one go with a dramatic flourish when Percy interjected, "Students are not allowed to drink alcohol." Coughing slightly, John corrected, "Ahem, this is pumpkin juice." He added sheepishly, "I couldn't get any wine at school, and the house elves in the kitchen refused to provide any." The solemn atmosphere dissolved into laughter at this revelation. The 7 members then drank their pumpkin juice in unison, officially establishing the Stars Club in their modest gathering spot, marking the beginning of a legacy tied to John. He couldn't help but feel a twinge of regret that Fleur Delacour wasn't there to complete their assembly. In a school where various clubs existed, mostly initiated by professors, the Stars Club, founded by John, remained a secret known only to its 7 members. Following his induction, Draco Malfoy's demeanor grew even more haughty, his steps more pronounced, and even Neville Longbottom seemed more agreeable to him. John had emphasized that within the Stars Club, past grievances and family backgrounds were irrelevant. They were to be the closest of allies. Initially resistant to the idea of associating with Percy Weasley and Neville Longbottom, Malfoy's perspective shifted after John's declaration. Percy is the president of the student council, and Neville, though he may appear docile, is not someone to be underestimated, John had warned. Malfoy's skepticism was quelled after a near defeat by Neville, leading him to accept the new hierarchy within the club. Malfoy had assumed he would rank among the top members, but reality proved otherwise. Even Daphne and Neville outmatched him, not to mention Heinrich and the others. "It's a dangerous world. I'm number 7, Malfoy remarked, only for John to correct him with a sneer. "You're thinking too highly of yourself. You're number 8. This revelation stunned Malfoy, as John explained the existence of another member at Beauxbatons, relegating Malfoy to the 8th position, with the possibility of further demotion if new members were added. "Work hard, kid," John advised Malfoy, patting him on the shoulder with a meaningful look. He chose not to reveal the closeness of their familial connections, emphasizing the importance of personal effort and growth within the club. How can he feel at ease as a father? When he initially deceived Lucius, he was brimming with pride. Yet now, finding himself unable to take the stage, isn't it akin to a slap in the face? From now on, you will double your training efforts. Only when you can defeat Neville will you be exempt from training, John declared with a stern tone. Painting grand visions of the future has always been an essential skill for leaders. He added earnestly, "I have great expectations for you." These words ignited a fire within Malfoy, his veins pulsing with newfound vigor, akin to being infused with an elixir of motivation. However, unbeknownst to him, his fervent reaction had been witnessed by nearly everyone present. Well, everyone except Percy. When John informed Percy that Barty Crouch was on the lookout for an assistant, his joy was so overwhelming it was as if he was ready to soar into the skies right then and there. Chapter 126, Crookshanks and Goozy. The screeching sound was deafening, as if it could pierce through the eardrums. On the Dementor's body, a layer as thin as smoke seemed to be violently torn apart by an unseen force. John was more focused than ever, his wand acting like a scalpel as he meticulously controlled the process, stripping the Dementors layer by layer. The magic crystal hanging around his neck shimmered, and the 3rd Dementor perished as John accidentally exerted too much power. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, John's brows furrowed in frustration. He couldn't understand why he still struggled to control every trace of his magical power with precision. It's impossible to read a Dementor's mind. Their cries are the only indication of their state, he mused, removing his earplugs with a stoic expression. With a single tap on the cabinet, the boggart inside fell silent, shrinking back as if it were dead. John's gaze shifted to the newly added reagent shelf, where a vial containing a smoky substance sat. This substance, akin to blood, was something he had painstakingly extracted from the boggart. The black smoke within the vial moved aimlessly, reminding John of another creature from the wizarding world. Beside the vial, several strands of silver silk floated. These strands appeared pure and almost divine. Is this the undigested soul of the Dementor, or its own soul? John pondered for a moment before donning his gloves and using his wand to carefully extract the silver threads. They resembled what he had seen coming out of Nagini, and he grasped them without hesitation. A wild idea took hold of John. "Return of the soul," he whispered, pointing his wand at his own head. The silver thread entered his ear, and suddenly, John's vision changed dramatically. He found himself unable to move, confronted by a black-haired wizard with a cold, disdainful gaze. A flick of the wizard's wand sent John reeling in pain, feeling as though his bones were shattering and his skin was being peeled away inch by inch. A scream rose to his lips, only to realize his tongue had been severed, and his face contorted in agony. Surrounded by others who were similarly imprisoned, a sense of resentment began to swell in John's mind, eventually engulfing the entire room. After enduring prolonged torture, John's eyes snapped open, and he found himself back in the secret room, gasping for air. The experience had felt terrifyingly real. Glancing at the clock, he realized that half an hour had passed. "It's too dangerous to implant a soul into the body," John concluded, his body still trembling from fear. He closed his eyes tightly, taking a moment to recover. The table in front of him bore the imprint of his fingers, a testament to the pain he had just endured. "We'll have to find another method in the future," he muttered, noticing his fingers were bleeding. Casting a spell to stop the bleeding, John couldn't help but notice a silver lining to his ordeal. After a restful night's sleep, he felt surprisingly refreshed. "What happened?" John exclaimed in amazement, looking at the book in front of him. Without activating the master mode, he found he could read 10 lines at a glance. This unexpected development led him to speculate, could it be because of that soul fragment? The idea that stuffing soul fragments into the brain could enhance mental power seemed like something a dark wizard would do, and John considered himself a good person. This enhanced state lasted for an hour, suggesting a time limit to its effects. If it could be made into a potion, it would be akin to a stimulant in the magical world, John mused as he walked out of the classroom after class, still longing for the feeling of heightened mental acuity. On the eve of Halloween, the Slytherin common room was filled with laughter. Daphne reluctantly said goodbye to her sister Astoria, while Malfoy and his cronies made a vow to celebrate. After handing Filch the permission slip for Hogsmeade, John caught sight of Harry. Pleading with Professor McGonagall, Harry said, "Please, Professor McGonagall, my aunt and uncle, forgot to sign the form." Professor McGonagall, maintaining a solemn and businesslike expression, replied, "I'm afraid not, Potter. As I've said, you cannot go to Hogsmeade without a permission slip." Unbeknownst to the young wizards, Professor McGonagall had a deeper reason for her refusal. She was aware that Sirius Black, a notorious fugitive, was searching for Harry. Despite Hogsmeade being a village solely inhabited by wizards, Sirius's reputation for having caused destruction with a single curse weighed heavily on her decision. Harry was visibly disheartened by this, prompting John to raise an eyebrow in confusion. He wondered if his previous warning to the Dursleys had been ignored. The thought of persuading those stubborn guardians was daunting. If Harry ever turned against them, the Dursleys would be in grave danger. Seeing Harry's disappointment, Hermione and Ron tried to console him. "There's still the Halloween banquet tonight," Ron said, attempting to lift Harry's spirits. However, Harry, who might have once looked forward to such events, found little solace in the thought, preferring the company of his friends over the festivities. Indeed, the Dursleys had neglected the matter entirely, having not been in contact since Harry's departure. In his anger, Harry had left without securing their signature, a detail he had overlooked until it was too late. John, trying to be helpful, clapped Harry on the shoulder and said, "It's okay, there are plenty of joke products, delicious candies, and butterbeer to enjoy in the future." However, this only seemed to deepen Harry's longing for Hogsmeade, causing his mood to further sour. Hermione, frustrated, chided John, "That's not how you comfort someone." Unperturbed, John patted Harry's shoulder once more before leaving. Meanwhile, a curious sight unfolded outside. A dog and a cat, carrying packages of dog food and dried fish, respectively, roamed the grounds. This unusual pairing caught Ron's attention, though he quickly relaxed upon realizing he hadn't brought his mouse along. "It was a good decision to give Crookshanks to Tom," Hermione remarked. The cat and dog, known respectively as Crookshanks and Tom, had formed an unlikely alliance, much to the surprise of Hogwarts students. Their friendship had even helped ease the tension between Hermione and Ron. After promising to bring back gifts from Hogsmeade, Ron and Hermione hurried off, leaving Harry to return to the castle alone. Filch watched him warily, while Mrs. Norris meowed for attention, prompting Filch to feed her some dried fish. The adventurous duo of Tom and Crookshanks made their way to the Homping Willow. With Crookshanks skillfully disabling the tree's defenses, they ventured into the secret passage below, leading to the Screaming Shack where Sirius Black was hiding. Sirius, having narrowly escaped capture by the Aurors thanks to his animagus abilities, grinned at the sight of the two animals. They seemed to communicate in their own way, barking and meowing, yet conveying a clear message. Sirius was ready to take action. If John had known that Tom was distributing dog food to others, he would have likely scolded the dog for not living up to expectations. Yet, in this moment, the unlikely camaraderie between a cat and a dog hinted at a larger plan unfolding, one that could change the course of events for Harry and his friends. To catch that accursed mouse and bite him to death was the sole focus. Of course, there was no need to worry about finding the way. After all, as a Hogwarts graduate, Sirius knew the castle like the back of his hand. Navigating through the familiar, yet eerily silent corridors of Hogwarts under the cloak of night, Sirius's heart pounded with a mix of excitement and vengeance. The once lively halls, filled with the laughter and chatter of students, now echoed with the soft patter of his footsteps. The moonlight streaming through the windows cast long shadows, making the suits of armor seem like silent guardians watching over the school. Sirius moved with purpose, his mind replaying the betrayal that had led him to this moment. The thought of finally confronting the traitor, the one who had turned their world upside down, fueled his determination. He knew the risks involved in returning to Hogwarts, a place swarming with those who believed him a criminal, but the chance to right a wrong was worth any peril. As he crept closer to his destination, Sirius couldn't help but reminisce about his days at Hogwarts. Memories of mischief, adventure, and unbreakable bonds formed in these very halls flooded his mind. It was a bittersweet reminder of what had been lost, but also of what still could be saved. Determined to not let the past cloud his judgment, Sirius focused on the task at hand. He knew that capturing the traitor was just the first step in a long journey to clear his name and protect those he loved. With every step, he steeled himself for the confrontation that awaited, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The castle, with its ancient magic and secrets, seemed to acknowledge Sirius's resolve, its walls whispering encouragement. He was no longer just a fugitive on the run, he was a warrior, fighting for justice. And with that realization, Sirius Black pressed on, guided by the light of the moon and the fire in his heart, ready to confront his destiny. Chapter 127, Forbidden Magic and Stripped Souls. In Hogsmeade Village, the only all-wizard village in Britain, John stepped into Honeyduke's candy shop, a place beloved by young wizards and frequented by adults as well. The sight of candies shaped like cockroaches crawling around made John ponder the peculiar mindset of their creator. Picking up one of these candies, he experienced the unsettling sensation of it squirming in his mouth. It was overwhelmingly sweet, akin to swallowing a mouthful of syrup, so intense that it nearly choked him. "Could I have some of these?" John asked the shopkeeper, maintaining a stoic expression as he crunched down on the candy. After spending 10 galleons, he filled his small bag with a variety of sweets. Hogsmeade, though a village, was bustling with activity. John noticed Hagrid heading towards the 3 broomsticks and decided to follow. Inside, he ordered a butterbeer, finding it pleasant, though he mused it might be better if served cold, despite the risk of it becoming too thick and greasy. "John, what brings you here?" Hagrid, a frequent patron, exclaimed upon noticing John. John gestured for Hagrid to join him, observing the Ministry of Magic officials milling about outside. "Hogsmeade seems to be attracting a lot of attention from the Ministry," he remarked casually. Hagrid, nursing a beer nearly as large as a bucket, took a hefty gulp before leaning in, a troubled look on his face. "You know, Sirius is lurking near Hogwarts," he whispered, clearly struggling with whether to share more. After several failed attempts to continue, Hagrid's discomfort was evident. "Don't strain yourself, Hagrid. You're seeking my help, aren't you?" John inquired, taking a sip of his butterbeer. His demeanor shifted to one of authority, despite the absence of his ring of conjuration, which would have completed his wizardly image. Hagrid, now feeling as though he was confiding in someone as formidable as Dumbledore, straightened up and hesitantly said, "John, you're incredibly powerful, the most formidable student I've ever encountered. Sirius will surely target Harry, and I hope you can." "Protect Harry?" John interjected, his tone indifferent. "Hagrid, you're not the first to ask this of me. I've heard similar requests since my second year." Hagrid felt awkward, aware of the oddity in asking a student to safeguard another. "Harry isn't a child anymore, Hagrid. He's capable of protecting himself," John stated, declining the request. His focus was on studying soul magic, leaving little time for other concerns. Hagrid, growing anxious, raised his voice. "You don't understand how dangerous Sirius is. He betrayed James, his best friend, and moreover, he's—" Pausing, Hagrid's expression turned somber. "He's also Harry's godfather. I can't imagine how Harry would react upon learning the truth." John pondered this, realizing the depth of Harry's potential anguish. The notion of avenging his father's death could drive Harry to recklessness, a concern evidently shared by the Weasleys. For Harry, this betrayal marked the onset of his misfortunes. John empathized, knowing he would struggle similarly if placed in Harry's shoes. Hagrid, lost in thought, took another sip of his drink, the weight of the situation pressing heavily upon him. In the dim light of the tavern, Hagrid's expression was somber, his large hands wrapped around a glass of beer that seemed almost comically small in his grasp. "John, you have to promise me you'll stop him," Hagrid implored, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by a serious concern. Despite his bumbling nature, Hagrid's love for Harry was unparalleled. He was like a clumsy bear of a father, fiercely protective of his cub. "I'll look after him, Hagrid, but you must understand, Harry isn't a puppy." "I can't just keep him on a leash," John replied, his tone firm yet understanding. He knew the importance of ensuring Harry's safety, but also recognized the need for Harry to make his own choices. Hagrid's face brightened at John's assurance. In his eyes, John was the mower, formidable student at Hogwarts, capable of outmatching even the professors. "Another glass of butterbeer, please," Hagrid called out, signaling for a refill as he noticed John's empty glass. After finishing his drink, John stood up to leave. Hogsmeade had proven less interesting than he had anticipated, but his true purpose lay elsewhere. Cloaked in shadows and anonymity, John made his way to the Hogshead Inn, a place far removed from the warmth and camaraderie of the Three Broomsticks. The inn was notorious for its unsavory clientele and the macabre decor of animated pig heads, their saliva dripping ominously from their fangs. Seated in a secluded corner, John's presence was concealed beneath his cloak, his face hidden from view. It wasn't long before a figure approached, donning a white mask. "Sir," the masked man greeted, his voice familiar to John. "Where is the item I requested?" John inquired, his voice calm yet commanding. "Here," the man replied, presenting a silver-carved box. "We retrieved it from an old witch in Nocturne Alley. She had been using a child for experiments, but we've dealt with her." John inspected the box, confirming its contents before nodding in approval. "Return to the shop and keep me informed. The Ministry hasn't taken any action against us, have they?" he asked, his voice still laced with a hoarse quality. "No, sir. In fact, Cornelius Fudge himself expressed a desire to visit you, but I declined on your behalf due to your absence," the man named Tangmi responded with a hint of admiration. "Fudge's interest suggests Dumbledore is growing impatient, and Fudge himself is becoming desperate," John mused, shaking his head. "Fudge lacks the qualities of a competent minister, will watch and intervene when necessary." With a nod of agreement, Tangmi departed the Hogshead Inn, leaving John to contemplate the ancient tome within the silver box. This was no ordinary book. It was a tome of forbidden magic, ancient and powerful, requiring careful handling. Its contents included research on the soul, including methods of soul separation, a topic of dark intrigue. John didn't linger in Hogsmeade. Utilizing apparition, he vanished from sight, leaving Daphne searching in vain. His return to Hogwarts was swift, his destination the Chamber of Secrets. Even Filch seemed surprised by his sudden appearance, and Harry, ever curious, could only watch as John disappeared down the corridors. In the solitude of the chamber, John opened the silver box to reveal the red leather-bound book. The moment his fingers brushed against its cover, a piercing scream assaulted his ears, reminiscent of a Dementor's wail. With a grimace, John employed occlumency to quell the cacophony, determined to uncover the secrets that lay within. After the mysterious voice faded away, John's expression visibly relaxed. He opened the book, which was filled with records penned in elegant cursive handwriting. As John perused the pages, his eyes widened in surprise at intervals. Once he had absorbed the information, he closed the book, and with a newfound determination, took the box to capture more Dementors. Following the successful capture, John began his experiments with a solemn mantra, curse to curse, soul to soul, take care of yourself. As he worked, the Dementor before him started to disintegrate, piece by piece. 3 hours swiftly passed as John remained focused on his task. Then, an extraordinary phenomenon unfolded before him. A human form, radiating a silvery white glow, was extracted by John's meticulous efforts. The stark contrast between the black and white was mesmerizing. Success? John whispered to himself, barely containing his excitement. The luminous human form condensed into a small orb, and with precise movements of his wand, John separated the black from the white. A triumphant smile spread across his face as he carefully stored the last fragment of the soul into a vial. He had achieved the impossible. A Dementor was not only dissected, but done so in a manner that preserved its essence. Using their soul as a blade, John mused, his gaze lingering on the dwindling pile of soul fragments. His initial elation faded into a somber reflection. It's a cruel operation, he admitted with a heavy sigh. Yet, the presence of Dementors offered a grim consolation. There were always more to be captured for his experiments. John's venture into the unknown realms of magic was marked by both groundbreaking success and the ethical dilemmas that accompanied his methods. As he continued his research, the line between innovation and morality blurred, leaving him to ponder the true cost of his pursuits. Chapter 128, Lupin's Discovery and the Encounter. After returning to the Gryffindor common room, Harry found himself bombarded with questions from an overly curious Colin Creevey. Opting for a quieter environment, Harry decided to leave, especially since he couldn't admit to Colin that his lack of a permission form prevented him from joining the others on their Hogsmeade visit. As Harry wandered the corridors, he encountered Professor Lupin, who appeared unusually pale and somewhat distressed. Lupin invited Harry into his office for a chat and offered him some tea. Harry, still processing the day's events, accepted the offer somewhat absent-mindedly. Their conversation soon turned to the topic of the first Defense Against the Dark Arts class. Harry, curious, asked why Lupin had prevented him from confronting the boggart. Lupin confessed that he had assumed the boggart would transform into Voldemort in Harry's presence, potentially terrifying the other students. Harry admitted that while Voldemort was his first thought, it was the Dementors that truly haunted him. Their discussion was abruptly interrupted by a knock on the door, revealing Snape with a potion in hand. Harry couldn't help but suspect Snape's intentions, especially given the tension between him and Lupin. However, Lupin reassured Harry that he was simply unwell and needed the potion for his condition. Despite the potion's foul appearance, which made Lupin grimace in discomfort, he explained its necessity. Lupin had once saved up a significant amount of Wolfsbane potion while working part-time at the Johnny Silver Hands store, generously distributing some to needy werewolves. Now, with only 2 bottles left, he had no choice but to rely on Snape's brewing skills as per Dumbledore's arrangement. Seeing Lupin in such a state, Harry decided it was time to leave and mentioned he would look for John. Lupin, puzzled, inquired about John Wick, wondering if he had gone to Hogsmeade. Harry, unsure of John's whereabouts, left Lupin to his thoughts. Lupin, reflecting on the past, felt a pang of sadness as he looked at Harry, seeing Lily's eyes in him. He reminisced about his school days with the Marauders, lamenting the loss and betrayal that had left him the sole survivor of his close-knit group. His thoughts turned to Sirius, and he couldn't help but feel conflicted about his old friend. Later that evening, at the banquet, Lupin noticed John Wick's absence among the returning students. After the banquet, Lupin encountered John, who greeted him with a near slip of the tongue, almost calling him by his first name. John explained his absence, claiming he had lost track of time while studying. Lupin, though suspicious, bid John farewell, watching him leave with a sense of unease. This encounter left Lupin deep in thought, his suspicions about John Wick growing as he pondered the mysterious student's true intentions. The action triggered a memory in him, and he found himself muttering, "Coincidence?" After a quick meal, John made his way back to the Slytherin common room, where students were trickling in, buzzing with excitement from their trip to Hogsmeade. Daphne approached John with a frown, demanding, "Why are you back so early?" "Ran into some trouble," John replied nonchalantly as he settled down. He pulled out a handful of cockroaches, offering them to Heinrich, who was lounging on a sofa with a casual, "Want some?" Heinrich gave the cockroaches a silent, disdainful look. Despite his silence, his expression clearly communicated his disgust. "Actually, they're not bad," John commented, popping one into his mouth before putting the rest away. Catching Heinrich's gaze, John asked indifferently, "Do you need help with something?" A fervent look crossed Heinrich's pale face as he lowered his voice to say, "I want to become stronger." "The Star Society shares its power." Heinrich revealed his ambition. John looked at him, his pale and handsome face breaking into a smile. "Ambition is not a fault. I'll help you become stronger," John promised. "Standing up, you can come to me anytime." Heinrich gave a slight bow in acknowledgement. John had hoped for a restful night's sleep, but the news of Sirius Black's arrival threw the entire school into chaos, disrupting his plans. Dumbledore had ordered all students, including John, to the Great Hall. John had managed to separate his soul once before, but only under extreme fatigue. As he made his way to the hall, his nonchalant demeanor suggested he was already aware of the situation, which puzzled Harry. The Gryffindors and other students were abuzz with the news. The fat lady's portrait had been attacked by Sirius in his failed attempt to enter. The professors were scouring the school, with Percy Weasley keeping order. Sleeping bags appeared out of thin air, and John claimed one in a corner, hoping for just 2 hours of sleep to feel rejuvenated. Hermione's worried voice reached John's ears. "Do you think Black is still in the castle?" "Dumbledore seems to believe so," Ron replied. The trio settled into their sleeping bags, relieved they weren't in their tower that evening, fearing what might have happened if Sirius had chosen the previous night for his attempt. Ron, exhausted from the day's activities, speculated that Sirius had lost track of time and had already fled. Harry, however, considered the possibility that Sirius had chosen this moment deliberately and perhaps had inside help. After all, opening a door from the inside was easier than breaking in. As Harry's thoughts raced, the door creaked open, revealing Dumbledore, Snape, and Percy. Snape's voice caught Harry's attention as he questioned, "Have you considered how he managed to enter, Professor?" Dumbledore responded, "Many theories, Severus, but none conclusive." Snape, hinting at a previous discussion, suggested, "Remember our conversation before the term started? It seems impossible for Black to enter without inside help." Dumbledore, with a note of finality, stated, "I do not believe anyone in this castle aided Black." With that, the conversation ended, leaving the mystery of Sirius Black's entry into Hogwarts unsolved. "I must go down and find the Dementors," Dumbledore stated firmly. "As I mentioned, it's crucial to inform them once we've completed our search." The primary reason for gathering the students wasn't just to guard against Sirius Black's potential threat, but, more importantly, to shield the students from any unfortunate encounters with the Dementors. Recently, several Dementors had vanished, prompting both the Ministry of Magic and the Dementors themselves to express a desire to conduct a search within the school grounds. If it were within Dumbledore's power, he would prefer to keep them at bay, away from the students. Upon hearing Dumbledore's words, the sense of sleepiness that had enveloped the 3 young students dissipated instantly, replaced by a surge of alertness. However, amidst this sudden wakefulness, John remained soundly asleep, undisturbed by the conversation around him. The urgency of the situation was clear. The safety of Hogwarts and its students was at stake. Dumbledore's resolve to manage the Dementors' involvement without causing panic or harm was a testament to his dedication to the school's well-being. Meanwhile, the contrast between the alert students and the still slumbering John added a touch of lightness to the otherwise tense atmosphere, reminding everyone that despite the dangers that loomed, moments of innocence and peace could still be found. Chapter 129, Regaining Focus and Delving into Transfiguration. As the Dementors swept through the castle, their chilling presence made the air almost suffocating, causing the young wizards to toss and turn in their sleep. After 2 hours had passed, John's eyes snapped open at the precise moment he had planned to wake. His first realization was the absence of his dog, Tom. Glancing at his 3 roommates, he noted their obliviousness to his wakefulness. With a gentle press of his palms against the ground, John silently invoked the super sensation mantra. An invisible wave of energy radiated from him, extending his sensory reach to over 300 meters. "Have the Dementors entered the castle?" he pondered, surprised that Dumbledore would allow such creatures inside. He reassured himself that animals, including Tom, would be safe as long as they avoided direct encounters with the Dementors. Feeling energized after a good rest, John lamented his inability to leave the dormitory for his usual experiments. Resigning himself to his current situation, he retrieved a book on transfiguration from his bag. Thanks to his ability to see in the dark, he didn't need to light a lamp. As dawn approached, the Dementors withdrew from the castle, having failed to locate Sirius Black. This sparked a flurry of discussions among the students about how the notorious criminal could have infiltrated the school. Hannah Abbott shared a rumor that Sirius had disguised himself as a flowering bush, adding to the intrigue. The day brought more challenges for the Gryffindor students when they discovered that Sir Cadogan had replaced the portrait of the Fat Lady, leading to a series of bizarre and confusing passwords. After freshening up, John encountered Peeves tormenting Moaning Myrtle in the girls' bathroom. Myrtle's tears and Peeves' laughter filled the air until John intervened. "Peeves, come here," he commanded, his presence immediately dampening Peeves' spirits. Having once captured and experimented on Peeves, John had earned a reputation that even the Bloody Baron couldn't rival. Curious, John inquired about the attack on the Fat Lady. Peeves, ever the trickster, responded with a hint of fear. Sirius Black's temper is terrifying, like a bear. This clue led John to suspect that Sirius might be an animagus, capable of transforming into an animal to evade the Dementors. Before Peeves could dart away, John reminded him of a previous request. Peeves' demeanor shifted to one of eager anticipation, hoping for a favor in return for his information. Agreeing to help, John saw this as an opportunity to further his understanding of the magical world, particularly the complex art of transfiguration. As the day unfolded, John's thoughts lingered on the implications of Sirius Black's abilities and how they might influence his own studies and experiments. The mystery of Sirius's escape and his potential as an animagus added a new layer of intrigue to John's academic pursuits, fueling his determination to master the art of transformation. At the same time, John added a stipulation: you're not permitted to use it during class, but feel free to do so at any other time. Peeves, unable to contain his excitement, zipped away with a mischievous giggle, exclaiming, "Of course, Mr. John Wick." John could only shake his head, foreseeing the chaos Peeves was likely to cause. He thought to himself that for such pranks, the Weasley twins were the go-to experts. The Weasley twins were busy at Hogwarts, utilizing the school's owls to dispatch prank items to their fellow students who had placed orders. John penned a letter for Basil to send out, expecting the delivery to be completed by evening. It was Monday, marking the start of another hectic week. In the afternoon, during the Care of Magical Creatures class, John encountered the Hippogriff once again. Upon inquiry, he learned that Hagrid's adventurous spirit had gotten the better of him again. Hagrid regretted that many students hadn't had the chance to ride the Hippogriff during their first class. John, feeling a mix of amusement and exasperation, informed Hagrid, "Professor Hagrid, I must request leave today and won't be able to assist in managing the class." Hagrid, taken aback, asked, "You're asking for leave? Are you unwell? It's not that. I have some personal matters to attend to, John clarified. In reality, John was preparing for a significant personal challenge, animagus transformation. This complex process required a full moon cycle to complete, during which John would be unable to speak as he needed to keep mandrake leaves in his mouth at all times. Understanding the importance of John's request, Hagrid readily granted him leave, confident in his ability to manage the class without John's assistance. John left. Harry noticed John's departure, prompting Ron to speculate. Maybe the workload's too much, and he's decided to skip this class? Hermione, annoyed by Ron's comment, retorted, "Don't be ridiculous. If he were to skip any class, it would be divination." Despite her words, Hermione felt a pang of guilt, aware of how exhausted John had been. Unlike her, who had the aid of a time-turner to manage her schedule, John had been attending all his classes without any magical assistance. This realization made Hermione question why the school hadn't offered John similar support, leading her to feel as though she had inadvertently taken advantage of him. Meanwhile, Hagrid reintroduced the hippogriff, Buckbeak, to the class. An overly curious student approached Buckbeak too hastily and was knocked to the ground, causing a commotion. Hagrid, his mind in a whirl, quickly ended the class and escorted the injured student to the hospital wing. John, meanwhile, was busy preparing for his animagus transformation. He consulted Professor Sprout for mandrake leaves and gathered the necessary materials, including a chrysalis of a grimacing hawkmoth. As he awaited the approaching storm, essential for the final phase of his transformation, John reflected on the complexity and rarity of successful animagus transformations. He acknowledged that perseverance, talent, and a bit of luck were crucial, and considered seeking guidance from Professor McGonagall, an experienced animagus, who he believed would be willing to assist him despite his not being her student. John hesitated to seek Professor McGonagall's assistance, aware that his animagus transformation was far from ordinary. The prospect of morphing into a dragon in her presence was daunting. After all, it was common knowledge that animagi were incapable of taking the form of magical creatures. John's unique ability stemmed from an extraordinary event where he had consumed the blood imbued with magical power. He reasoned that the fewer people who knew about this, the better. Understanding the gravity of his situation, John contemplated his options. Revealing his secret to Professor McGonagall could lead to unforeseen consequences, not least of which would be her shock or fear at witnessing such an unprecedented transformation. The traditional teachings of Hogwarts stated clearly that animagi transformations were limited to non-magical animals, a rule that John's condition blatantly defied. John's internal conflict was palpable. On one hand, he recognized the value of Professor McGonagall's guidance in mastering his animagus form. Her expertise was unparalleled, and her support could prove invaluable. On the other hand, the risk of exposing his unique ability and the mysterious origins of his power weighed heavily on him. In the end, John decided to tread carefully, opting to explore other avenues for mastering his transformation. He knew that the path ahead would be challenging, but the desire to control his unique power without compromising his secret drove him forward. The journey to understanding his dragon form was just beginning, and John was determined to navigate it with caution and discretion. Chapter 130, Snape's Hint and the Soul Eater Curse. Money isn't everything, but it's undeniable that it motivates many actions, even in the wizarding world. John had quickly acquired the necessary materials for his animagus transformation, a delicate box filled with mandrake leaves. With the arrival of the first full moon, he would be ready to begin the process. As he pondered this, John remembered that Professor Lupin, afflicted with lycanthropy, would soon undergo his transformation. Given Lupin's condition, it was unlikely he would attend class in his werewolf form, despite the availability of Wolfsbane potion. As expected, Professor Snape stood in for Lupin in the Defense Against the Dark Arts class. "I'm sorry I'm late, Professor Lupin. John trailed off, confused upon noticing Harry's tardy entrance. "This lesson began 10 minutes ago, Potter. That will be 10 points from Gryffindor. Please take your seat," Snape announced from the podium. His tone was calm, yet it carried an unmistakable edge of sarcasm. Harry, however, remained standing, his gaze fixed on Snape. "Where's Professor Lupin?" he inquired. "He's feeling unwell today and couldn't attend," Snape replied, his grin carrying a sinister undertone. No student had ever dared to challenge his authority like this. His patience wearing thin, he sternly told Harry, "I believe I told you to sit down." Harry pondered Snape's words, recalling Snape's apparent desire to teach defense against the dark arts and the mysterious potion he had seen Snape give Lupin. It almost seemed as if Snape had poisoned Lupin. Unmoved, Harry pressed, "What happened to him?" "No life is in danger," Snape snapped, his patience exhausted. Despite his words, there was a hint of anticipation in his demeanor. 5 more points from Gryffindor. If I have to tell you to sit down a third time, it will be another 5 points. Harry finally made his way to his seat, while John couldn't help but smirk. Despite his harsh exterior, Snape had responded to each of Harry's questions. Snape surveyed the class with a frosty demeanor. Before Potter interrupted, "I was about to discuss the lack of records left by Professor Lupin regarding your previous lessons." "I'm sorry, sir, but we've covered boggarts, redcaps, kappas, and grindylows," Hermione interjected, eager to demonstrate their progress before quickly adding, "We were about to start learning." Silence. "I didn't ask for your input," Snape cut her off, his tone even colder. He expressed his dissatisfaction with Lupin's teaching methods, prompting Dean Thomas to attempt to speak up in Lupin's defense. However, a single glare from Snape silenced him. John shook his head, amused by his classmates' bravery. It seemed they hadn't noticed Snape's growing irritation. To quell the brewing unrest, John coughed softly, and the class gradually fell silent. Looking up at Snape, he smiled and encouraged, "Please, continue." Snape returned the look with a penetrating gaze before announcing, "Today, we'll discuss werewolves." His eyes briefly flickered to John as he added, "Mr. Wick, perhaps you could enlighten us?" The textbook in front of John flipped open to page 394, the chapter on werewolves. Snape, with a hint of laziness in his voice, asked, "How can one differentiate a werewolf from a true wolf?" It was unusual for Snape to directly engage John, especially with Lupin absent and the topic so closely related to his condition. Sensing the significance, John seized the opportunity. "There are subtle differences between werewolves and true wolves, including the shape of their pupils, noses, and tails," he explained. John answered effortlessly, earning 10 points for his response. Snape continued to quiz him on various aspects of werewolves, with John answering each question accurately. Hermione watched from a distance, her frustration evident. Her hand remained raised throughout the class, yet she was consistently overlooked. This oversight irked Ron, prompting him to voice his dissatisfaction loudly. "You've asked so many questions, and she knows the answers. If you're only going to acknowledge John, why not just award him 50 points directly?" Snape's reaction was swift and menacing. He approached Ron with a quick stride, bringing his face uncomfortably close. The surrounding students held their breath, marveling at Ron's audacity. Snape's whisper was soft, almost soothing, yet carried an unmistakable threat. "Shut up, Weasley!" After delivering his command, Snape straightened up and surveyed the room. His gaze alone was enough to make everyone retract any thoughts of protest. The lesson seemed exclusively tailored for John, turning into a peculiar duet of queries and responses between him and Snape. It became apparent that Snape was unusually focused on John, bombarding him with questions about werewolves, his eyes almost pleading for John to expose Lupin's secret identity. John fought the urge to facepalm. It wasn't as if he was unaware of Lupin's condition, but Snape's overt hints were unnecessary. After the interrogation phase, Snape shifted the focus to extracting knowledge about werewolves. He placed another piece of parchment before John, who glanced at his previous attempt, now lost in thought. "John Wick, your handwriting is atrocious. Rewrite it," Snape instructed, his tone leisurely yet firm. John's internal monologue was a mix of frustration and disbelief. He understood Snape's insinuations, but found the method overbearing. Despite feeling wronged, John complied and began rewriting. The end of the class was signaled by the bell, bringing a collective sigh of relief. Snape, however, had one last directive. His wand casually rested on the term werewolf, written in a textbook as he announced, "Everyone is to write an essay on identifying and dealing with werewolves," filling 2 rolls of parchment. He then turned to John, lowering his voice for emphasis. "John Wick, You will submit 4. John's frustration was palpable. He wanted to argue that he was already well versed in the subject, but Snape seemed indifferent to his silent protest, setting the deadline for Monday morning. Ron, still seething from being ignored earlier, found a silver lining in not being singled out for additional homework. However, his relief was short-lived as Snape called him out just as he was about to leave with the others. Ron's legs turned to jelly, and he could only muster a weak plea for help from Harry and Hermione, who could offer nothing but sympathetic glances. Ultimately, Ron was tasked with cleaning the school hospital's urinals without the aid of magic, a punishment that left him fantasizing about retribution against Snape. That night, John gazed at the sky, mindful of the approaching full moon. He made his way to the secret room, a place overlooked by the Dementors during their last search. Inside, he confronted a new Dementor, wielding his wand in one hand and summoning his Patronus, an albatross, to repel the creature. Before him were 2 bottles, one containing a silver-white essence, the other black. After a moment's hesitation, John chose the black substance, pondering its potential to separate souls. The Dementor, if it could be said to possess a body, was essentially a curse intertwined with despair. John pressed his hand against the black substance, absorbing it and forming a dark orb. He then extracted the darkness, weaving it around the Dementor like spider silk, ultimately consuming the creature's tattered cloak. John observed the scene before him with narrowed eyes, a hint of curiosity mingling with his usual stoicism. Cannibalism, he mused aloud, his gaze fixed on the orb in his grasp. With a deliberate motion, he retrieved a ring from his pocket. The ring, adorned with emerald green gemstones, seemed to pulsate with a life of its own as he held it out. "Come forth," he commanded softly. As if drawn by an invisible force, the darkness from the orb began to migrate towards the ring. The blackness seeped into the emerald, marring its purity with sinister, spiderweb-like traces. "We shall name this the Soul Eater Curse." John declared, a sense of grim satisfaction in his voice. Slipping the ring onto the ring finger of his right hand, he flexed his fingers, feeling the newfound power coursing through him. His attention then shifted to a Dementor nearby, noticeably weaker than its counterparts. With a swift motion, John extended his hand towards the creature. Layers of black energy peeled away from the Dementor and surged into the ring. The creature let out a piercing shriek, its essence stripped away until nothing but a mass of unconscious souls remained. The transformation of the ring and the subsequent defeat of the Dementor showcased not only John's ingenuity, but also his deep understanding of dark magic. His actions, though seemingly ruthless, were calculated and precise, revealing a man who was not afraid to delve into the shadows to achieve his goals. Chapter 131, The Ball Game, Accident and the Attacking Dementor. It was a rainy Saturday, seemingly an omen that the gods were not in favor of Gryffindor. Oliver Wood, the team captain, wore a grave expression as the umbrellas outside threatened to be swept away by the wind. Today was supposed to be the day they played against Slytherin, but the Slytherin team had dodged the match, citing injuries to their players. The injured player in question was Slytherin's new chaser, who had an unfortunate encounter with Buckbeak. "Those Slytherins!" Wood exclaimed, his words laced with frustration. "They're probably hoping to see us lose to Hufflepuff." Harry shared Wood's anger, especially after one of his friends was punished by the head of Slytherin and tasked with cleaning the school hospital's urinals. They peered outside, where the rain fell like bullets, stinging their faces as if they were being pelted with small stones. The wind was fierce, capable of unseating any young wizard from their broom, making flight control a daunting task. Harry donned his bright red team robes and, before entering the dressing room, caught sight of Draco Malfoy looking particularly sour, as if someone owed him a fortune. Malfoy was in the stands, flanked by Goyle and Crabbe, who struggled to hold onto a parasol over him. John, who had mastered the waterproof spell, effortlessly repelled the rain from his body and did the same for Daphne upon her request. "You seem to be in a foul mood," John observed, glancing at Malfoy. "Damn it, they think I'd lose to Potter." Malfoy spat out, his pride wounded. He had been determined to redeem himself, but the team's captain, Flint, had called off the game due to the injuries. This left Malfoy feeling humiliated, He had been fully prepared to prove his worth, and now his own team doubted his strength. Yet Malfoy was not one to shy away from a challenge. In fact, he was eager to face Harry. "When you become captain, you'll have control over these decisions," John remarked calmly. "But it's hard to accept," Malfoy admitted, his frustration evident. As the game was about to start, the rain blurred the colors of the teams, but John was unfazed. "Since you can't play, let's support our friends," he suggested, nodding towards Cedric Diggory, Hufflepuff's captain and seeker, who seemed undeterred by the storm. Cedric exchanged a respectful nod with Wood. "It's going to be a great game," he said, displaying sportsmanship that even pleased his rivals. The whistle blew, and the game commenced. Harry and Cedric took to the skies, their eyes keenly searching for the snitch amidst the chaos of bludgers and rain. Harry struggled with his vision, his glasses quickly becoming obscured by the downpour, making it nearly impossible to spot the tiny, golden snitch. The game was intense, with Harry narrowly avoiding collisions. Suddenly, lightning illuminated the sky, and Madame Hooch called for a timeout. During the break, Harry learned that despite the adverse conditions, Wood's rigorous training had given them a 50-point lead. However, without catching the snitch, the game could drag on indefinitely. Harry's spirits sank as he realized his blurred vision severely handicapped him. "With these glasses, I have no hope," he lamented. But in times of need, help often comes from unexpected places. Hermione appeared, tapping Harry's glasses with her wand and casting a spell that made them impervious to water. "There, now you won't have to worry about the rain," she said, handing the glasses back to Harry. Wood was overjoyed at this development. His gratitude towards Hermione so immense, he briefly considered an impulsive gesture of affection. However, he restrained himself, mindful of the propriety. With his vision clear despite the relentless rain and howling wind, Harry was once again ready to face the challenges of the game. He steered his broom back into the fray, his determination renewed. Amidst the storm, Harry scanned the skies for the elusive snitch, skillfully dodging a bludger that nearly collided with his head and executed a nimble maneuver beneath Cedric. The weather worsened, with lightning zigzagging through the clouds, signaling the increasing danger from nature itself. Realizing the urgency, Harry pivoted for a better vantage point. A sudden lightning flash momentarily illuminated the stands, revealing a large, shaggy black dog perched in the top row of empty seats. Harry's grip slipped, causing him to momentarily lose altitude. After clearing his vision, he noticed the dog had vanished. "Harry, behind you!" Wood's voice boomed over the din of the storm. Harry spun around to see Cedric closing in on the golden snitch. His heart raced with the realization that if Cedric caught the snitch, they would lose. Dismissing the mysterious black dog from his mind, Harry accelerated in pursuit. "Quick! Faster!" he urged himself, his voice lost in the roar of the storm. A familiar, chilling presence enveloped him. The Dementors, the very creatures that had once caused him to faint on the train, were now descending onto the Quidditch pitch in droves. From the stands, John's expression darkened as he finally discerned the cause of the disturbance. "The Ministry of Magic can't keep their creatures in check, so it falls to me," he declared, rising to his feet. Before Daphne could grasp the situation, John had already drawn his wand. "Expecto Patronum," he intoned. The professors, sensing the anomaly, turned just in time to witness the Dementors' invasion. Dumbledore's expression soured, but before he could act, a brilliant light pierced the darkness. "The Patronus charm?" Professor Flitwick squeaked, his excitement palpable. A majestic albatross, formed from the silver light, cleaved through the air, driving the Dementors back in terror. Flitwick couldn't contain his admiration for the powerful Patronus. John, focusing intently, extended his right hand, manipulating the rainwater to converge into a massive sphere. The crowd watched in awe as he merged his wand with the sphere and cast the Patronus charm once more. The albatross dove into the sphere, which then transformed into a gigantic white albatross. It soared, consuming any Dementors in its path, leaving none to escape. The effort visibly drained John, his forehead a mix of rain and sweat, as the magical exertion took its toll. The giant albatross eventually reverted to water, having devoured the majority of the Dementors. Professor Flitwick, overwhelmed with excitement, praised the innovative combination of the Patronus and water prison charms. lamenting that if this were a classroom setting, he would award John 100 points. The spectacle redirected everyone's attention to John, who stood in the stands, having single-handedly averted the crisis with a display of remarkable magical prowess. John gently massaged his chest with his right hand, offering Professor Flitwick a smile that was both modest and confident. "That's ridiculous," he said, though his tone belied his awe. The words powerful and elegant simultaneously sprang to his mind, perfectly capturing the essence of the moment. Upon witnessing John's successful repulsion of the Dementor, Professor Flitwick couldn't contain his excitement and let out a jubilant cheer. John, basking in the moment, suddenly remembered something crucial. He glanced upwards, only to see a figure plummeting rapidly towards the ground. It was too late for him to intervene. Arresto momentum. The air vibrated with the force of the spell, and Harry's descent halted mere inches from the ground. John's eyes quickly found the source of the timely intervention. Dumbledore, with a mere outstretched hand and no wand in sight, had performed the spell. John was no stranger to the concept of wandless magic, but witnessing it firsthand from someone as powerful as Dumbledore demanded respect. He offered the headmaster a salute, filled with genuine admiration. Dumbledore returned the gesture with a smile, his eyes twinkling with a mixture of surprise and appreciation as they landed on the massive Patronus and the cursed water prison John had conjured. An excellent spell variant, Dumbledore mused, silently acknowledging that even Voldemort, at his peak during John's third year, would have found himself outmatched. However, the immediate concern was Harry, who had fainted from the ordeal. As a result, Hufflepuff was declared the winner of the match, a conclusion that came as no surprise to anyone. Cedric Diggory, upon learning of Harry's condition, was struck by a sense of unfair advantage. Driven by his strong sense of sportsmanship, he suggested a rematch. This gesture deeply impressed everyone in Gryffindor, to the point where Oliver Wood, had he been a girl, might have been moved to confess his admiration for Cedric on the spot. The narrative, filled with moments of tension, bravery, and sportsmanship, painted a vivid picture of the complexities and camaraderie found within the walls of Hogwarts. Chapter 132, Ministry of Magic, Pleading Guilty and Sickness. Harry was rushed to the school infirmary, but the chaos of the day was far from over. Dumbledore descended upon the scene with a level of fury that John had never witnessed before. The sight of the Dementors ensnared within a Patronus-crafted water cell ignited a fire in the White Demon King's eyes. The potential disaster that could have unfolded had the Dementors invaded the Quidditch pitch was unthinkable. "I need to speak with Cornelius Fudge immediately, John. Please keep these Dementors contained," Dumbledore instructed with urgency. John nodded in agreement, even as a few daring students ventured closer, driven by curiosity. Managing the water prison with his wand, John felt the strain of his task. Professors Flitwick and McGonagall joined him, their expressions a mix of fear and outrage. The audacity of the Ministry of Magic to gamble with the safety of Hogwarts students was unforgivable. "We must lodge a formal complaint against them," Professor McGonagall declared, her voice laced with venom. "Mr. Wick, your timely intervention and innovative use of the Patronus charm, combined with a water prison, is nothing short of brilliant," Professor Flitwick chimed in, his voice tinged with admiration. As the charm's professor, he was genuinely impressed. John, however, was preoccupied with the practicalities. "Where should we relocate this? My magic crystal is depleting rapidly, and once it's exhausted, it's useless." The cost of a magic crystal was not insignificant, and the thought of its consumption pained him. Professor McGonagall suggested the dungeon, not the one belonging to Slytherin, but another within Hogwarts. Together, they managed to suppress and relocate the Dementors, leaving John feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. He noticed the ring on his right hand had absorbed numerous curses from the Dementors, its black lines growing increasingly distinct. By evening, the Ministry of Magic arrived, led by Minister Cornelius Fudge and Auror Chief of Staff Rufus Scrimgeour. Fudge, visibly distressed and mopping sweat from his brow, was clearly shaken by the day's events. The potential backlash from the wizarding families of England weighed heavily on him. John was summoned to the headmaster's office, where he encountered Dumbledore's sternest expression yet. Fudge, upon seeing John, eagerly approached him, his demeanor shifting to one of gratitude. "John Wick, the hero who thwarted the Dementors. Your actions have averted a tragedy and salvaged the Ministry's reputation. We are in your debt," Fudge exclaimed, extending an offer for future collaboration. His glance towards Dumbledore hinted at a deeper motive, perhaps an attempt to curry favor with the headmaster. Rufus Scrimgeour remained stoic, indifferent to Fudge's overtures. John, observing Dumbledore's disappointed gaze towards Fudge, sensed the complexity of the situation. Fudge's actions, though misguided, stemmed from a place of dedication to the wizarding world, a sentiment Dumbledore seemed to acknowledge, albeit with reservations. John stood before the Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge, with a perfectly crafted smirk on his face. "I'm sorry, Mr. Minister, but Principal Dumbledore is expecting me," he said, withdrawing his hand and turning to leave. Upon reaching Dumbledore, John was met with a look of satisfaction. "John, we need you to recount the entire incident," Dumbledore requested. John proceeded to describe the events in detail, from the moment the Dementor invaded the Quidditch pitch to how he managed to subdue it. Throughout his explanation, he remained composed, as if the feat he had accomplished was nothing out of the ordinary. Meanwhile, Fudge's expression grew increasingly sour, but John was unfazed by the minister's discomfort. He calmly suggested, "I believe the Dementors might have been unable to resist their nature due to the joyous atmosphere of the Quidditch match. Leaving students in their presence is akin to asking a greedy cat to watch over fish." Dumbledore gave a slight nod of agreement, his gaze fixed on Fudge. John knew he didn't need to be involved in the discussion that followed. Dumbledore's words to Fudge were sharp and critical, leaving the minister visibly embarrassed. As the meeting concluded on an unhappy note, John observed everything keenly, sensing an opportunity. Fudge's incompetence was glaring, especially in the face of Voldemort's resurrection. John decided it was time to see if he could expedite the minister's downfall. Unlike Fudge, Rufus Scrimgeour had always been decisive, employing Aurors to manage the Dementors. Unfortunately, Fudge viewed this as a power struggle and refused to cooperate. After the incident, John sent out a dozen letters to influential purebloods and other prominent figures. He knew that their collective dissatisfaction would be a thorn in Fudge's side, even if the minister hadn't explicitly erred. The current chaos only made Fudge's position more precarious. The next day, the Dementors were removed from Hogwarts. Over 20 of them appeared less menacing than before, with some even wearing ill-fitting robes. Scrimgeour, who had taken charge of the situation, assured Professor McGonagall of their punishment, confident in the support promised by Lord Johnny Silverhand. After Fudge's hasty retreat to his office the previous night, Scrimgeour was pleased to hear the sounds of the minister's frustration. It had been a long time since he had felt such satisfaction in dealing with Fudge. Meanwhile, Harry Potter had yet to awaken from his fall during the Quidditch match. That night, John gazed up at the clear, cloudless sky, illuminated by a full moon. It was the perfect time to begin his journey to becoming an animagus. With mandrake leaves in his mouth, John was unable to speak, but he had a workaround. Using his wand, he created red sparks in the air to communicate, planning to explain his temporary muteness as a result of excessive magical exertion. When Harry finally awoke, he was devastated to learn that the Quidditch match had been lost because of him. It wasn't the first time, but this loss was particularly hard on Oliver Wood, who was in his final year and had yet to win the trophy. To make matters worse, Harry's Nimbus 2000 had been destroyed by the Humping Willow, leaving him without his beloved broom. John was in a foul mood. The stream of visitors to see Harry seemed endless, and to add to the chaos, John had brought him a box of cockroach clusters. Hermione eyed John with suspicion. "What's gotten into you, John?" she asked, her tone laced with concern. John remained silent, offering no explanation. Instead, he gestured towards his throat, and then, with a flick of his wand, a marker appeared in his hand. He scribbled down the reason for his condition on a piece of parchment. It turned out that his current state was a result of an incident where he had saved Harry, causing him to lose his voice temporarily. Upon learning this, Harry's guilt intensified. He realized the depth of John's sacrifice and the pain he must be enduring. The atmosphere in the room shifted as Harry and Hermione processed this revelation, understanding the gravity of John's actions and the bond of friendship that compelled him to act despite the personal cost. Chapter 133. Lupin returns and requests leave. After losing his ability to speak, John received fewer points in class. However, the atmosphere lightened when Professor Lupin returned from his monthly transformation, looking somewhat pale but managing a smile. The students, who adored Lupin, immediately voiced their complaints about Snape's harsh treatment during his absence. Malfoy, on the other hand, showed his displeasure, as he preferred Professor Snape over Lupin. The defense against the dark arts class was far from dull, especially when John demonstrated his proficiency in casting spells silently, a skill typically not mastered until the 6th year, yet John had done so in his 3rd. Lupin, intrigued, noticed the ring on John's finger. It was similar in style to one he recognized, but the color was different, and it was worn on the right hand, not the left as Johnny Silverhand did. Curious, Lupin approached John after class, asking casually when he had started wearing the ring. John, surprised by the question, quickly wrote in the air with his wand, "Gift." Lupin considered this explanation, remembering that Halloween had just passed, but he couldn't shake off a nagging feeling of doubt. He knew of John's remarkable feat of repelling Dementors with a Patronus charm, a spell dark wizards were incapable of casting. This fact alone made Lupin question any potential connection between John and the notorious Johnny Silverhand, a man known for his ruthless ambition and dark magic. Despite his concerns, Lupin hoped John had no ties to Silverhand, especially with Sirius Black's recent escape possibly being linked to him. As a teacher and a bystander, Lupin sincerely wished to keep his students away from such dangerous influences. In potions class, John once again caught Snape's resentful glare, prompting him to silently criticize Snape's unprofessional demeanor. Snape, feeling wronged, reminded himself of his reasons for being upset with John, who had lost his voice defending others from Dementors, a noble act that reminded Snape painfully of Lily. John, with his keen observational skills, likely knew of Lupin's werewolf condition, which could have been used to expel him from Hogwarts and implicate him in Sirius Black's escape. However, Snape's plans were thwarted, leaving him to stew in his resentment. Daphne grew increasingly worried about John, especially when his usual hearty appetite diminished significantly. To avoid swallowing mandrake leaves, John resorted to drinking the paste directly. The Star Club, including Cedric and Percy, showed their support, offering remedies and expressing their gratitude for John's bravery in protecting the school. This chapter highlights the complexities of relationships and suspicions within Hogwarts, showcasing the students' and teachers' varied reactions to the challenges they face. Concern etched in his eyes, John reassured Neville with a wave of his hand, indicating he was fine, despite Neville's insistence that he visit the hospital wing. "No, thank you for your concern," John declined, opting instead for Neville's care, which resulted in Neville doubling his training efforts. Alongside Malfoy, Heinrich took on the role of John's rigorous instructor. As time passed, John remained silent, his anticipation growing for the upcoming full moon. However, he noticed Professor Lupin's keen eyes might be close to uncovering his secret. To avoid any confrontation, John requested leave from school activities. Contrary to what many believed, John hadn't left Hogwarts. Instead, he secluded himself in a secret room, only emerging occasionally to check the weather, maintaining a different schedule from the rest of the school. This led to rare encounters with others, who assumed they were mistaken about seeing him. John's preparations for the second full moon were meticulous, especially since clear skies were crucial for his plan. He placed a saliva-soaked leaf into a transparent bottle under the moonlight, adding his own hair, dew, and a hawkmoth chrysalis to the mixture. He then concealed the bottle in the Forbidden Forest, specifically where a spider's nest had been eradicated by fiendfire, leaving it deserted. Following the ritual precisely, John awaited a storm and performed a daily spell at sunrise and sunset, pointing his wand to his heart and reciting Amato, Animo, Animato, Animagus. His return to classes was met with cheers from Slytherin House, which, to his surprise, still led in points thanks to the efforts of Daphne, Malfoy, and Heinrich. Their achievements kept Slytherin in the lead, much to the dismay of the other houses. As December approached, and with Christmas on the horizon, John's focus was on the impending storm necessary for his ritual. Meanwhile, he pondered whether Mrs. Wick would visit the school during the holidays. The trio of younger students hoped for his swift recovery, while Ron Weasley could barely mask his disappointment. Unbeknownst to John, Ron had hoped Gryffindor would surpass Slytherin in his absence, a plan now dashed with John's return. During class one day, John received a letter from a long-eared black owl, which was affectionately greeted by his own snowy owl, Tom. The letter, from Tang Mi, detailed Cornelius Fudge's attempts to sway public opinion in his favor by vilifying John, now known as Johnny Silverhand, the ruler of Knockturn Alley. The Daily Prophet painted Silverhand as a tyrant, attributing every crime in Knockturn Alley to him, regardless of the truth. With a sneer, John contemplated his response to Fudge's actions. Sanctions? Heh, he mused, recognizing that dealing with Fudge required a decisive and authoritarian approach. John began drafting responses, employing a mix of incentives, power negotiations, and coercion. His singular goal was to exert pressure on the Ministry of Magic, demonstrating the true extent of his influence and power. The Minister for Magic was not only foolish, but also remarkably incompetent and selfish. Sometimes certain ruthless methods are unavoidable, John mused, his expression one of mischief as he sent off the last letter. As he rubbed the gemstone on his ring, an air of danger emanated from him. It was as if a predator had awakened, baring its blood-stained teeth, poised to strike. Within 3 days, turmoil erupted within the Ministry of Magic. Chapter 134, Accountability and Resignation at the Ministry of Magic. Cornelius Fudge was in a state of despair. The pressure wasn't just from the ordinary wizarding community. Even the prestigious 28 families had stepped forward to voice their concerns. Lucius Malfoy, with a mix of sneer, coldness, and nonchalance on his face, made his presence known in the bustling Ministry of Magic. His platinum blonde hair perfectly combed, he tapped his cane on the ground with a precise rhythm, drawing the attention of many. The sound echoed, dong-dong, causing the ministry officials to turn their gaze towards him. Lucius's influence had grown. Not only had he been reinstated as a director of Hogwarts, but he also owned the Museum of Dark Arts. Fudge, barely concealing his irritation, fixed his gaze on Lucius. "Lucius, what brings you here?" he asked, his voice strained. "Minister Fudge, I'm here representing the Hogwarts board," Lucius replied, his voice cutting through the noise as he found a seat and sat down gracefully. Fudge had organized this press conference in a desperate attempt to deflect blame. The plan was to have Rita Skeeter, the Daily Prophet's star reporter, stir up controversy about Knockturn Alley and direct all criticism towards Johnny Silverhand. If the story gained enough traction, it could potentially overshadow the recent scandal of Dementors invading Hogwarts. Fudge glowered at Lucius, vowing to settle scores with the former Death Eater when the opportunity arose. As more people filled the room, Fudge's expression darkened upon spotting Dharma Alex Belby, a prominent figure who had previously pressured him during the Hagrid incident and a recipient of the Order of Merlin First Class. The atmosphere intensified with the arrival of Gilderoy Lockhart, adorned in extravagant turquoise wizard robes. Lockhart, a best-selling author and 6-time winner of the Wizard Weekly Most Charming Smile Award, was an unexpected attendee. His presence was significant, not only because of his Order of Merlin, but also due to his membership in the Anti-Dark Arts Alliance, a powerful group composed of influential figures and ministry officials from various countries. Fudge, harboring a disdainful sneer, believed he had Lockhart's measure, considering him a fraud. He was confident that he could expose Lockhart and use him as a scapegoat if necessary. After sending a warning message to Lockhart through his assistant, Fudge mistakenly interpreted Lockhart's distant nod as compliance. As the room filled, Fudge, adjusting his attire, approached the podium. He exchanged a knowing look with Rita Skeeter, who seemed preoccupied with her notes. "Ahem. Thank you, esteemed colleagues, for joining us today," Fudge began, his tone attempting to convey authority and control. Lucius, growing impatient with Fudge's lengthy and irrelevant introduction, raised his hand and interjected with a tone dripping with sarcasm. "Minister Fudge, perhaps you could skip the pleasantries and address the matter at hand." The room erupted in muffled laughter at Lucius's remark, leaving Fudge with no choice but to proceed. Giving Rita a nod, he cleared his throat. "Please, feel free to ask your questions." Rita stood up, and Fudge, expecting her to target Johnny Silverhand, was taken aback when she veered off script, posing a question that caught everyone by surprise. The mention of Dementors entering Hogwarts on their mission sparked a sharp reaction. Fudge's eyes widened in disbelief as he stared at Rita Skeeter, almost suspecting she was an imposter. "Is it a dereliction of duty by the Ministry of Magic that the Dementors are out of control?" she pressed. "Sirius Black continues to threaten the wizarding world. Do you not bear responsibility? I've heard that 10 pure-blood families have lodged formal complaints against you. What are your thoughts on this?" Rufus Scrimger, head of the Auror office, once suggested that Aurors should oversee the Dementors. Do you consider it selfish to disagree? Each question struck Fudge like a dagger, leaving him gasping for air, his eyes reddening with stress. He hadn't anticipated Rita Skeeter's betrayal. Was the Daily Prophet turning against him? What was happening? Lucius Malfoy stood, capturing the room's attention with a sneer. "On behalf of the Hogwarts Board of Governors, I demand the Ministry of Magic answer for its negligence," he declared, causing a stir among the journalists. Dharma Alex, leaning heavily on his cane, added coldly, "The Potion Masters Alliance questions Cornelius Fudge's leadership of the Ministry of Magic. We seek a wise leader, not a bumbling fool." The Alliance, a prestigious group comprising the top potion masters, rarely made public statements, adding weight to his words. Gilderoy Lockhart, seizing the moment, rose with his trademark smile. "I, too, question Cornelius Fudge's competence. Under my watch, Dementors would never have invaded the school." His bold claim only fueled Fudge's fury. "You liar! Everything about you is a fabrication," Fudge shouted, pointing at Lockhart. Overwhelmed, he ordered his enforcers, "Seize him and send him to Azkaban." The enforcers acted immediately, launching a sleeping charm at Lockhart. Fudge's grim satisfaction was evident, believing Lockhart's downfall would distract from the day's events. However, Lockhart was prepared. "Protego," he declared, casting an iron armor charm to deflect the attack. Then, brandishing his wand, he countered, "It seems you wish to attack me, a Merlin third-class medal recipient and honorary member of the Anti-Dark Arts League." Fudge was taken aback, doubting Lockhart's ability to cast such a powerful charm. But Lockhart, fueled by magic from his ring, confidently deflected the enforcer's spells. He effortlessly dodged their attacks, using silent spells to incapacitate them without uttering a word. "Reducto!" Lockhart finally declared, sending a blinding white light towards the enforcers, who were promptly knocked aside. He then turned, a look of melancholy on his face. "Why provoke me? Why force my hand?" Fudge, now desperate to apprehend Lockhart, watched in disbelief as his plan unraveled. Lockhart's unexpected prowess left the minister questioning the true extent of his abilities and the loyalty of those around him. The house collapsed and turned over, a clear testament to the chaos that had ensued. It was evident to anyone with eyes that Gilderoy Lockhart possessed a formidable power, rendering any need for deceit to bolster his reputation unnecessary. Yet, unnoticed by many, Lockhart was so overwhelmed by the situation that his palms were drenched in sweat. Adorned with rings on all but one of his fingers, he was a picture of nervous anticipation. The drama reached its climax, and with the publication of the Daily Prophet the following day, Cornelius Fudge found himself compelled to resign prematurely amidst a whirlwind of scandals and accusations. Rufus Scrimger, the head of the Auror office, stepped in as the interim minister of magic, vowing to prioritize the safety of Hogwarts students above all. His declaration was bold and uncompromising. "We'll stop at nothing to apprehend Sirius Black, even if it means cornering him in a toilet and drowning him in a urinal." This ironclad approach marked a significant departure from the Ministry of Magic's previous, more tepid stance. The Aurors were dispatched to Hogwarts to bolster security and oversee the Dementors. Ron's face flushed with excitement as he recounted Scrimger's words. "If you meet him in the toilet, drown him in the urinal. That's the mark of a true, iron-blooded Auror," he exclaimed, mimicking Scrimger's tone. Harry, too, was caught up in the fervor, vigorously stabbing his fork into his potato. They both admired the resolve of the real Aurors, though Harry couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for Fudge, who had shown him kindness at the start of the school year. Over at the Slytherin table, the atmosphere was different. "Draco, this is your father's moment," whispered the Slytherins, casting envious glances at Malfoy, who swelled with the pride. The Daily Prophet featured Lucius Malfoy, looking cheerful and at ease. It was a moment of triumph for the Malfoy family, signaling their grand return to the upper echelons of the wizarding world after a lengthy absence. John glanced at the newspaper. With Fudge's resignation and Scrimgeour's temporary appointment as Minister of Magic, the focus was now on capturing Sirius. If they succeeded, perhaps the shadow hanging over them could finally be lifted. Chapter 135, The Enigma of Photography, Magic and the Marauder's Map. John set aside the newspaper, his gaze drifting towards the Gryffindor table where Ron and Hermione were embroiled in yet another argument. He pondered, how do they manage to quarrel every day, yet maintain such a strong bond? The root of their frequent disputes was their pets. Crookshanks, Hermione's cat, had a penchant for chasing after Scabbers, Ron's pet rat, which only fueled Ron's disdain for the feline. From Ron's perspective, his loyalty lay with Scabbers, a companion of 12 years, over a cat that Hermione had owned for barely 6 months. John couldn't help but wonder about Crookshanks' peculiar obsession with Scabbers. It was odd, considering Crookshanks should recognize the rat as his owner's friend's pet. A thought struck him. Peter Pettigrew? The Marauder's Map, capable of revealing the identities of everyone within Hogwarts, never listed the rat by Ron's side as Scabbers. John had been aware of this anomaly, but found himself at a loss on how to approach Ron with his suspicions about the rat's true identity. Lately, Scabbers had become increasingly reclusive, hardly ever leaving the dormitory, which thwarted John's plans to investigate whether the rat was an animagus in disguise. With no opportunity to confirm his theory, John reluctantly shelved his curiosity. As he continued his meal, John sensed a presence behind him. Turning, he saw Professor Snape deliberately slowing his pace. Deciding it was time to address the matter, John called out, "Professor." Snape halted and turned, an expectant look on his face. John, wiping his mouth, hinted at the heart of their unspoken conversation. Full moon. Snape's response was quiet yet meaningful. "Mr. Wick, you are a clever man." John couldn't help but wonder if Snape was subtly mocking him. Dismissing the thought, he replied with a smile, "Thank you for the compliment." Their exchange, cryptic to onlookers, resembled a dance of wits between two sly foxes. Snape's quickened departure hinted at his uplifted spirits. The scene shifted to the Gryffindor table, where the atmosphere was lightened by Harry's excitement over Professor Lupin agreeing to teach him the Patronus charm. This new skill promised to shield him from the ridicule of Malfoy and his cronies. Speaking of Malfoy, he made a dramatic entrance, circling the tables to taunt Harry about the Dementors, eliciting laughter from his friends. Harry, Ron, and Hermione, momentarily united against a common adversary, stood ready to defend their friend. "Shut up, Malfoy." Ron's temper flared, his patience worn thin by the taunt. Malfoy, unfazed, issued a veiled challenge. "Weasley, you should be thankful we're in the Great Hall." Ron hesitated, aware of Malfoy's improved prowess. He noted Malfoy's uncharacteristically civil tone, a change he attributed to Percy's influence within the Star Society. "I'll fight you, Malfoy," Harry declared, stepping forward in defense of his friend. Hermione, ever the voice of reason, intervened. "Enough, Malfoy. Do you want to be locked up?" She stood firm, ready to protect her friends from losing points or facing detention. Casting a curse, Ravenclaw triumphed over Gryffindor. Malfoy, with a sneer directed at Harry, mocked, "Oh, dear Potter, always hiding behind your friends." He then mimicked a crying baby, turned, and led his group away. Ron, fuming with anger, slammed his fist on the table, while Hermione comforted Harry. "He's just a coward at heart." Harry, feeling somewhat reassured, replied softly, "I know, thank you." This incident seemed to strengthen the bond between the trio. As time flew by, John dedicated himself to his magical practice, greeting each sunrise and sunset with new spells. Despite the absence of any impending storm, a sense of unease lingered. To hone his skills, he often hunted Dementors, leaving one less in their ranks after each encounter. The Auror's efforts had confined the Dementors to a specific area, yet they frequently attempted to escape, not realizing their disappearance were the work of an unseen predator. John, indifferent to their plight, mastered the art of soul extraction, filling shelves with bottles of soul fragments, each glowing with a white light. The ring on his finger darkened as he became more adept at using the Soul Eater curse to attract dementors. "Almost enough," he murmured, eyeing the collection of soul fragments, now sufficient for his plans with Nagini. Demonstrating his mastery over ancient magic, John crushed a box effortlessly, a spell far more sophisticated than the levitation charm, designed to capture and destroy objects. This technique, discovered in a tome of forbidden magic, left no trace behind. With his preparations complete, John released a boggart that had remained untouched for some time, showing a rare moment of mercy. On December 18th, as students gathered at the castle gates for a trip to Hogsmeade, John noticed Harry standing alone, a picture of solitude. Moved by the sight, John decided to gift Harry one of his Marauder's maps, reasoning it rightfully belonged to him. Approaching a puzzled Harry, John revealed the parchment, quickly dispelling any notion of assigning homework with a mysterious hint at the map's true nature. With a tap of his wand and the declaration, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good," the map's secrets were unveiled to Harry, who was astounded by the gesture. "This? For me?" Harry asked, visibly touched by the gift. "Of course," John affirmed, a knowing smile on his face. "It belongs to you." Harry's joy was palpable, a testament to the unexpected kindness and the deepening connections within the magical community. Harry discovered several escape routes from Hogwarts, sparking his curiosity. "Thank you, John," he expressed his gratitude genuinely. With a wave and the words, "Mischief managed," John departed from the castle. Shortly after, as Harry was about to use a secret passage to sneak out, he was intercepted by the Weasley twins. With a twinkle in their eyes, they teased, "Before we embark on our adventure, let's add a bit of flair to the occasion." With that, they ushered Harry into an adjacent classroom. Inside, they revealed to Harry a clandestine method of exiting Hogwarts. Harry, looking perplexed, was about to voice his thoughts when Fred noticed the Marauder's map in his grasp. "Ah, so it's been in your possession all this time. We feared it was lost forever," Fred remarked. Harry, still processing the situation, handed over the Marauder's map, which the twins promptly activated. Their ease and familiarity with the map struck Harry as both odd and amusing. Thanks to the twins, Harry's path to Hogsmeade was now clear. Brimming with anticipation, he navigated through the secret tunnel hidden within the statue of the one-eyed, humpbacked witch. He followed the winding passage until he emerged in the storeroom of Honeyduke's candy store, his heart racing with the thrill of the covert journey. Chapter 136, Departure from School and the Soul Surgery. While his classmates made their way to Hogsmeade, John had other plans. Upon reaching Hogsmeade, he promptly apparated to Belby Manor. The sharp sound of his apparition faded as he materialized outside the grand estate. With determined strides he entered, finding Dharma Alex engrossed in potion-making. The sight of John brought a smile to Dharma Alex's face. "You've arrived just in time. The Great Serpent is on the brink of awakening," he greeted. Dharma Alex, recently returned from a victorious escapade at the Ministry of Magic, couldn't hide his glee. His successful overthrow of a minister had inflated his ego. Under John's guidance, the potion they were working on had undergone numerous revisions. The addition of mandrake leaves transformed the scarlet liquid into a vibrant green. John then produced a bottle containing a soul, its white light stark against the dimness of the room. Initially dismissive, Dharma Alex's attitude shifted to shock upon recognizing the contents. "What have you done?" he exclaimed, a mix of incredulity and panic in his voice. John responded with a calm smile. "Don't worry, I haven't killed anyone." Dharma Alex was skeptical, but seeing John's serene expression, he relaxed. "I'll need an explanation later, but I trust you wouldn't engage in such acts," he conceded after a moment of silence. With that understanding, John added the soul to the potion, which then shifted from black back to white, signaling their success. The potion now glowed a holy white, casting a fluorescent light in the dungeon. The next step was the surgery on the great serpent, Nagini. John approached the slumbering creature, using water elemental magic to guide the potion into Nagini's mouth. Silver threads began to emerge, weaving around the serpent. Success, John murmured, observing the transformation under the potion's influence. Dharma Alex, too, watched intently, documenting every detail. As the silver and white threads multiplied, Nagini's voice echoed in John's mind. "John?" she inquired. "It's me," he replied, his voice a comforting presence amidst the chaos. John then ventured into the heart of the spell, his consciousness traveling through myriad tunnels until he arrived in a misty, white expanse. This realm, a limbo between life and death, was formless and infinite. There, he encountered a woman in a blue dress, her features distinctly East Asian, her beauty marred by a blood-green curse that clung to her. "Nagini?" John's voice was soft, tentative. The woman looked up, disbelief in her eyes. "John?" she whispered, her voice a mix of hope and despair. Her appearance was haunting, a once graceful figure now ravaged by the curse, her body a tapestry of wounds and decay. In her hand, she held a small, silver-white figure, the essence of the potion that John had introduced. This soul fragment worked tirelessly to mend the fractures threatening to consume her. Approaching Nagini, John observed the blood-green aura that enveloped her, a stark reminder of their intertwined fates. Taking a deep breath, he prepared to confront the daunting task ahead. This situation was dire, but John was determined to restore Nagini, to heal the deep wounds that bound her to this cursed existence. John's expression was more solemn than ever as he faced Nagini, the gravity of the situation weighing heavily on him. "Nagini, I'm going to start the treatment now," he announced with a determined look. As he raised his hand, his mirrored action was reflected by the external body, allowing for a synchronized and intuitive view of the soul's transformation. "If it becomes too much for you, don't hesitate to let me know," he added, his tone serious. Nagini, filled with hope, nodded energetically. A temporary soul protector was in place for Nagini, giving John the confidence to proceed with the treatment without worry. He meticulously opened all the soul bottles from his small bag, and a holy white orb of light began to circulate around him. With precision, John directed his wand through one of the orbs, uttering the spell, "Return of the Soul." The orb morphed into 100 soul scalpels, piercing into Nagini's serpentine form. In a blurred vision, Nagini felt the sharp pain as the scalpels penetrated her, her face contorting in agony. John, with unwavering focus, manipulated the soul scalpels to extract the malignant blood curse, drawing it out bit by bit. The curse, in retaliation, transformed into a boa constrictor, launching an attack on the scalpels. Despite the assault, John remained unfazed, his movements steady and precise. As the soul mass depleted, he transformed another soul into a scalpel, continuing the painstaking process. Nagini's soul, fragmented and vulnerable, was meticulously cleansed of the blood curse, hidden even in the most minute crevices. Outside, Dharma Alex watched intently as Nagini, enveloped in a silver and white brilliance, underwent a transformation. The sight filled him with a mix of anxiety and awe. Could it really be happening? He thought, barely containing his excitement. It was a sight unprecedented, something not even Merlin could have claimed to achieve. John, with the precision of an orchestra conductor, methodically removed the remnants of the blood curse. Under Dharma Alex's watchful eye, Nagini's form began to shift, her serpentine body gaining human limbs. The transformation was grotesque, a bizarre amalgamation of human and snake, yet John's focus never wavered. The blood curse, stubborn in its resistance, morphed into a giant python, emanating a sinister, blood-green aura. It lunged at John, attempting to swallow him whole. With a flick of his wand, John countered, transforming a soul into a dazzling white light that struck the curse head-on. The soul-crushing curse left the python dazed, allowing John to form a large sword from another soul and deliver a decisive blow to its head. As the blood curse attempted to retreat back to Nagini, John enveloped her in a protective soul barrier, intercepting the curse. Seizing the moment, he struck at the python's root, causing a burst of white light as the creature writhed in agony, unable to flee. Trying to escape, John sneered, summoning another soul orb that ignited into a white flame. The flame morphed into a dragon, fiercely attacking the python. The blood curse, now in the form of a python, was consumed by the soul fire, its wails echoing as it was utterly vanquished. John watched intently until the last vestige of the blood curse vanished. Turning his attention back to Nagini, he noticed the soul protector within her weakening, rapidly diminishing as if deflating. Nagini's fragmented soul looked on in disbelief, hardly able to comprehend that the blood curse that had plagued her was finally gone. "Okay, it's all over," John said with a chuckle. Despite the evident fatigue etched on his face, his smile radiated genuine happiness and contentment. Approaching Nagini, John expended the last fragment of his soul to repair Nagini's fragmented spirit. The souls he used were distilled from centuries of dementors consuming the essence of others. Upon connecting with Nagini, these souls began to seamlessly merge with her being. "Welcome back, Nagini," John greeted, extending his hand with a courteous gesture. Nagini regarded the boy for a moment before slowly reaching out her own hand in response. Suddenly, an unexpected transformation occurred. The air around them seemed to pulse with a newfound energy, hinting at the profound change taking place. John's gesture, simple yet laden with the weight of his sacrifice, bridged the gap between them, symbolizing a new beginning. However, the tranquility of the moment was shattered as the unexpected transformation unfolded, hinting at the unpredictable nature of magic and the complexities of their intertwined destinies. Chapter 137, Misty Illusions and Hidden Souls. John soared through the air, his heart racing as he neared Nagini, but before he could reach her, an unseen force struck him, sending him tumbling across the ground. After several rolls, he managed to steady himself and come to a stop. As he looked up, a figure materialized from the blurred surroundings. The sight of the face before him caused John's pupils to constrict in shock. It was a face more handsome with age, its pallor stark against the occasional flash of red in the eyes. The figure wore a plain suit, a cold smile playing on his lips. John knew this face all too well. With gritted teeth, he uttered the name Voldemort. This version of Voldemort appeared older and more refined than the young student John remembered. Standing up, John faced him, noting that Voldemort hadn't drawn his wand but simply regarded him with an indifferent gaze. "So, you've intruded into my domain," Voldemort remarked, his voice laced with disdain. John couldn't help but respond with a mix of anger and coldness. "Yours? Voldemort, it seems you've turned Nagini into a Horcrux." Indeed, it wasn't just the blood curse entwining Nagini, but also a fragment of Voldemort's soul. John realized he should have anticipated this, given Nagini's role as a Horcrux in the original story. Voldemort had not only been ruthless to others, but had shown an extreme form of cruelty to himself by splitting his soul. As John wiped the blood from his mouth, he felt the toll the encounter had taken on his body. The soul, being the essence of a person, meant that any harm to it could have fatal consequences. When Voldemort made a move towards Nagini, an invisible force lifted her by the neck. Asserting his ownership, Voldemort declared, "Nagini, you are mine." "Nagini?" she managed to choke out, struggling for air. In that moment, John acted. With a gesture, he sent Voldemort flying, freeing Nagini from the invisible grasp. She fell to the ground as John coldly stated, "You're not the only one versed in these magics." Voldemort, slightly taken aback, regained his composure mid-air and landed gracefully. With a sinister smile and bloodthirsty gaze, he taunted, "A weak soul dares to challenge me in this illusion." John's concern deepened as he noticed the silvery light on his fingers fade. The realization hit him hard. Using magic in this realm drained the soul. "No wonder," he murmured, understanding the grave situation he was in. Without his magical strength, defeating Voldemort seemed an impossible task. Yet abandoning Nagini was not an option. With Voldemort watching closely, retreat was not in John's plans. Resolved, he decided to confront the challenge head-on. Initiating the attack, John waved his hand, igniting flames in the otherwise empty illusionary space, accelerating the drain on his soul. A fireball grew from a spark in his right hand, surprising Voldemort with the ancient magic John wielded. As Voldemort countered with a water snake, their collision created a dense mist in the misty illusionary territory. Seizing the moment, John dispersed the mist around Voldemort, rendering the soul-generated fog impenetrable to vision. With his right hand, he conjured a dagger made of soul energy, despite the cost of his illusion becoming nearly transparent. With a cruel smile, John reminded himself, "Magic? Don't forget, I'm a level 7 master of short weapons." In the mist, John became an omnipresent shadow, moving with the stealth and precision of a nightcrawler. Voldemort, though shrouded in fog and exuding a terrifying aura, was caught off guard. A green light shot through the mist, missing John by inches. Confident in his attack, Voldemort was puzzled by his miss, and a sense of dread quickly filled him. In a desperate move, he turned, but it was too late. In an instant, John had struck, leaving 7 bloody wounds as a testament to his swift and deadly approach. Voldemort's expression shifted dramatically as John materialized before him like an apparition. "Crucio!" he bellowed, unleashing a bolt of red lightning that struck John, eliciting a stifled groan from him as a significant portion of his chest was scorched, leaving a gaping hole. Without a moment's hesitation, John hurled the dagger, then swiftly manipulated it with a spell, sending it hurtling towards Voldemort with lightning speed. In response, Voldemort conjured a defensive barrier akin to the iron armor charm. However, upon contact, the dagger shattered into countless fragments, much like fragile bubbles. Caught off guard, Voldemort watched as John advanced, his eyes morphing into vertical slits. In a gruesome display, John tore off his right hand, which then transformed into a gleaming silver sword. Uttering words in the ancient dragon tongue, he declared, "I am a fire dragon." Flames enveloped the blade, and despite the excruciating pain, John thrust it forward, piercing Voldemort's body. The flames erupted, engulfing them in a fiery inferno, and Voldemort's facade crumbled under the intensity. Clutching the blade, his eyes ablaze with fury, Voldemort sneered, "You can't escape, Avada." His resilience was evident as he prepared to exchange blows, aiming a deadly curse at John's face. In that critical moment, John's mind went blank, realizing his underestimation of Voldemort. Just as the curse neared, a woman leaped forward, her battered body colliding with Voldemort and diverting the curse away from John. In a fit of rage, Voldemort seized Nagini by the neck and hurled her aside, casting the killing curse directly at her. As the curse approached, Nagini closed her eyes, content with the thought of sacrificing herself for John. Time seemed to slow, allowing John to witness Nagini's resolve and Voldemort's wrath in vivid detail. Releasing the sword, John extended his hand towards Nagini, whispering, "Return of the soul." The green light bathed the entire area. Nagini awoke in a dimly lit dungeon, her gaze shifting between the astonished bald old man and John, who lay with his eyes shut, his body gradually turning to gray. Nagini's heart ached as she attempted to approach him, only to pass through his ethereal form. Realizing her own body had been restored and lay nearby, she was overcome with despair. Damo Alex, regaining his composure, questioned, "Was it successful?" Ignoring his own emotions, he rushed to John's side, revealing that John had used a spectral spell to extract Nagini's soul. "Where is John? What happened?" Damo Alex demanded, his voice laced with panic. He quickly administered a potion to John, hoping for a miracle. Meanwhile, Voldemort, bewildered by Nagini's sudden disappearance, faced John's mocking smile. "It seems you're not as knowledgeable as you think," John taunted, his form flickering like a candle in the wind under Voldemort's wrathful assault. Voldemort, enveloped in black smoke, confronted John, lifting him by the throat. The silver sword embedded in his chest disintegrated, but John's eyes gleamed with defiance, a smirk playing on his lips. "Curious? Then go ask," he taunted, nodding towards an empty space behind Voldemort. Realizing he'd been deceived, Voldemort spun around, only to find nothing. In a fit of rage, he turned back to John and unleashed the killing curse. This marked the first time John had cast the curse without a wand, striking Voldemort squarely, leaving his visage marred by cracks. With a handsome face twisted in terror, he screamed, not even sparing a glance at John. Clutching his face and howling in madness, it was a tragic scene, especially since he was under the effect of a death curse, an unforgivable curse. Amidst his screams, Voldemort's face began to disintegrate, his body crumbling inch by inch, emitting a green glow from within. The fragment of Voldemort's Horcrux perished. John sat on the ground, his gaze drifting in the direction Voldemort had been looking just moments before. He hadn't been lying. In that direction, a figure cloaked in black was barely visible, his face obscured. But John could sense his presence and felt his quiet observation. John's soul felt more transparent, as if on the verge of dispersing. "Can you make me understand?" John spread his hands, his eyes locked on the figure in the black cloak, and asked, "Are you another soul, or the god of death?" The figure remained silent, and John got the impression that the figure in the black cloak was amused. "Interesting. You're the most amusing person I've ever encountered," the figure finally spoke as he approached John. John was powerless to do anything but watch as the figure drew nearer. Standing there, the figure in the black cloak radiated an overwhelming aura of deathly stillness. Then he revealed his identity. "You may call me," he paused, "the Grim Reaper." The revelation hung in the air, heavy with implications. John, sitting on the cold ground, faced the embodiment of death itself, a being shrouded in mystery and fear. Yet, in this moment, there was a strange sense of clarity. The Grim Reaper, a figure often associated with the end, stood before him, not as an enemy, but as a curious observer of the peculiar turn of events that had unfolded. Chapter 138, The Legend of the Three Brothers and the Grim Reaper. In the collection of tales by the poet Beadle, there is a story known as The Legend of the Three Brothers. Once, three brothers were traveling along a desolate, winding road at twilight. Eventually, they came upon a river, treacherous and deep, impossible to wade or swim across. However, being skilled in magic, they simply waved their wands and conjured a bridge to cross the river. Midway across, they encountered a hooded figure blocking their path, Death himself. Death was furious, having been cheated of 3 new victims, as travelers usually perished in the river. Yet, cunning as ever, Death feigned admiration for their magic and offered each brother a prize for their ingenuity in evading him. The eldest brother, a warrior by nature, requested a wand more powerful than any other, one that could win any duel. Death fashioned a wand from an elder tree branch, creating the Elder Wand, the most powerful wand in existence. The second brother, driven by arrogance, sought to further mock Death by asking for the power to bring back the dead. Death picked up a stone from the riverbank and presented it to him, claiming it had the power to resurrect the dead. This stone became known as the Resurrection Stone. The youngest brother, wise and humble, did not trust Death. He asked for something that would allow him to hide from Death himself. Reluctantly, Death handed over his own invisibility cloak, thus completing the trio of objects that would come to be known as the Deathly Hallows. Tragically, the eldest brother was murdered for his wand, and the second brother took his own life, driven to despair by the hollow return of his lost love. Only the youngest brother, shielded by the invisibility cloak, lived a full life and eventually greeted Death as an old friend, departing this world peacefully. As the tale concluded, the narrator revealed himself to be Death, leaving John bewildered. "So I'm dying?" John asked, peering into the shadow beneath Death's hood, searching for clarity. Death, amused by John's demeanor, responded affirmatively. John, facing the prospect of death after narrowly escaping the clutches of the White Demon King, found himself resigned. "Saving someone's life, and now this. I feel rather foolish," he admitted, not ready to accept his fate, but powerless to change it. Surprisingly calm, John's attitude took Death aback. "Aren't you afraid?" Death inquired. John shrugged, a gesture of indifference. "What else can I do? Kill you and run away?" His honesty was stark, for there was no point in pretense. Death chuckled, intrigued. "You remind me of someone who once faced death with equal frankness." "You're not ready to die. In fact, I wouldn't be here if not for you," Death explained, revealing that John had inadvertently solved a problem for him. As a reward, Death decided to send John back to the living. Suddenly, John felt a force pulling him away, and a blinding white light forced his eyes shut. When he opened them again, he was met with the tear-streaked face of Dharma Alex, nearly collapsing onto him in relief. "Get off!" John pushed Dharma Alex away, disgusted, and quickly checked himself over, as if to ensure he was still intact after his brush with death. Dharma Alex, stunned, could only stare. John, who had been lifeless moments before, was now very much alive, leaving everyone in disbelief at the miraculous turn of events. Just moments ago, John had been on the brink of death, and now, suddenly, he found himself back to life. Overwhelmed with emotion, Alex rushed towards him, unable to contain his excitement. "Stop, I know you're excited, but let's not get ahead of ourselves." John, finding the situation somewhat overwhelming, urged Alex to calm down. Heeding the warning, Alex managed to pull himself together, and John took a moment to assess his condition. "Am I really back?" he wondered aloud. The transition from facing death to returning to the living world left him in disbelief. To confirm his reality, he gave his fac a reluctant slap, wincing as his cheek swelled. "It seems to be true," he muttered after feeling the sting. Relief washed over him as he realized his return was genuine, though the pain in his body quickly reminded him of his recent ordeal. John noticed the medicine bottle nearby and realized that Alex must have administered numerous potions in an attempt to save him. The thought made him feel bloated and slightly nauseous. His gaze then shifted to Nagini, who lay on the ground, her soulful eyes wide with surprise. "I'm back, Nagini," John greeted her warmly, "and you're welcome back too." As Nagini's soul was restored, she awoke with a groan, blinking away discomfort. Tears formed in her eyes, and as they streamed down her face, a smile broke through her tears. "Thank you, John," she whispered, gratitude evident in her voice. Reflecting on his near-death experience, John felt a surge of emotion. Life is precious, and so is love. Shouldn't we strive for freedom to enjoy both? He pondered. Despite the challenges they faced, he was grateful for the positive outcome. However, Nagini's soul was weakened, leaving her unable to walk. John crafted a wheelchair for her, and she took up residence at Belby Manor. He couldn't help but wonder about the blood curse's peculiar side effect of preserving youth, joking that it might have been coveted in the magical world if it didn't involve turning into a snake. After ensuring that Alex would take care of Nagini, John prepared to return to school. He knew Alex would look after her as if she were his own, especially considering the significance of lifting the blood curse, a feat that could earn Alex high honors in the magical community. Upon completing his task, John received a notification of his achievement and a unique ability that allowed him to navigate the realms of life and death. He then apparated back to Hogsmeade, arriving as the sun began to set. Despite having some time to spare, he wasn't in the mood for leisure. At Honeyduke's, he purchased a dozen chocolate bars, hoping to alleviate his pallor and the weakness that made his hands tremble. Returning to Hogwarts, John knew it would take some time for his hand to recover, but he was grateful he could still use his wand with his left hand. Exhausted, he sought refuge in his lounge, desperate for a good night's sleep. Waking up past dinner time, John headed to the kitchen, where the house elves were ready to assist him. He requested a steak, hoping to regain some strength, but as he ate, he realized something was amiss. After finishing the steak and moving on to an apple pie, the truth dawned on him. He had lost his sense of taste. The realization hit him hard, especially since he hadn't noticed it earlier due to his anxiety. John's mouth was devoid of any flavor, the sensation akin to chewing wax. He had mechanically consumed the apple pie, but the aftertaste left him with a sense of shame. The price he had paid to save a life felt exorbitant. It took him a long while, sitting in the common room, to come to terms with his new reality. To deprive a food lover of his sense of taste, the god of death has shown no mercy, John muttered, his fists clenched and eyes burning with a newfound resolve. In that moment of despair, an audacious thought sparked within him. What if he could collect the Deathly Hallows himself and confront the god of death? The idea of challenging such a formidable entity and reclaiming what he had lost filled him with a mix of fear and excitement. Chapter 139, Murder and Talent Hall. John held a piece of bread in one hand, bringing it to his mouth. It was dry, offering nothing but a slightly stiff texture. With Malfoy having gone home and Daphne called back by Mr. Greengrass, the Slytherin common room felt much emptier, almost deserted. Heinrich, spreading jam on another piece of bread, placed it beside John. "Aren't you going to ask?" he inquired, noticing John's lack of curiosity about his injured hand. In Durmstrang, it's not uncommon for wizards to suffer bodily harm without even realizing it, Heinrich explained, his golden eyes appearing dull beneath his tousled black hair. His pale, handsome face bore a sickly expression. Accustomed to such circumstances, Heinrich began to serve John, taking on a role that seemed more than just friendship. John frowned, asserting, "We are friends, Heinrich." Heinrich paused, his dim eyes hidden by his hair. Shaking his head, he responded, "To me, you are the beacon of light that Edgar has sought his entire life." His words were sincere, leaving John momentarily silent. He had initially thought Heinrich's allegiance was solely about joining the Star Society, but now it was clear there was more to it. "Then I'll trust you to watch my back," John declared, his expression serious. A smile broke through Heinrich's sickly demeanor. Placing his right hand over his heart, he swore, "Behind you, there will always be a shadow named Heinrich Edgar." John chuckled. "That doesn't mean we can't be friends, right?" Heinrich, taken aback, felt a warmth in his heart. There's always a price for dabbling in the forbidden: an eye, an arm, a leg, or even life itself. By comparison, John's loss of taste seemed trivial. At least he still had his handsome face and nose intact, right, Voldemort? With Professor Lupin away for the holiday, John felt a bit more at ease. Lupin's keen perception had always made John wary, sensing that Lupin might have discovered something. After a tasteless breakfast, John made his way to Professor Snape's office. Snape was under the impression that John had uncovered Lupin's secret as a werewolf, and John knew he owed Snape an explanation. Moreover, he was curious about the root of Snape's evident disdain for Lupin. Even without knowing the specifics of their past, the depth of Snape's animosity was palpable, almost as if Lupin had stolen his wife. Arriving at Snape's office, John knocked. The door swung open abruptly, revealing Snape with a sneer upon recognizing John. This left John puzzled. Intelligent individuals often communicate with minimal words. Snape stepped aside, allowing John to enter before slamming the door shut behind him. With a stern face, Snape commanded, "Sit." John, sensing Snape's foul mood, complied. Snape retrieved a bag from his desk drawer, laying out various potion-making tools, among which a bottle of veritaserum stood out. John tensed, attempting to lighten the mood. "Professor, surely you don't need that?" Snape's sneer deepened. "You've kept your lips sealed tight. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been deprived of gossip for so long." Realizing why Snape was upset, John awkwardly scratched his head. "Is this about Professor Lupin?" he ventured, hoping to diffuse the tension. John had suspected that Snape and Lupin shared a bitter history, but the extent of Snape's resentment seemed far greater than he had imagined. Attempting to change the subject, John reached for the tool bag, only for Snape to slap his hand away. Wincing in pain, John grinned sheepishly. "Professor, do you hold a grudge against Professor Lupin?" John inquired, quickly adding, "Ahem, the students think highly of Professor Lupin." "Not bad. That hypocrite," Snape began, his tone laced with disdain, revealing the deep-seated animosity that lay beneath their professional facade. "An ugly guy." Snape nearly spat the words through clenched teeth as he recalled that group of infuriating Gryffindors: James Potter, Sirius Black, Peter Pettigrew, and Remus Lupin. The four had formed a tight-knit group, with Snen, Ape frequently finding himself at odds with them. Their encounters often involved casting jinxes, and there was a time when Snape nearly lost his life due to Lupin. Back then, without the Wolfsbane potion, Lupin had no choice but to isolate himself during the full moon, enduring the painful transformation into a werewolf. However, Sirius Black once deliberately led Snape into Lupin's hiding place. Although James Potter ultimately saved him, Snape never saw it as a genuine rescue, believing instead that James was merely afraid of the consequences of Snape's potential death. Faced with John's inquiry, Snape's expression was one of indifference as he stared back and posed a chilling question. "What if the esteemed professor you speak of was involved in a murder?" John was taken aback. Remus Lupin, involved in a murder? The Lupin he remembered, both as Johnny Silverhand and during his time at Hogwarts, seemed far removed from such accusations. Snape's demeanor suggested he was unwilling to delve into the past, leaving John to ponder the implications. "He's a dangerous man, John Wick," Snape finally said. After a moment of contemplation, John met Snape's scrutinizing gaze head-on and replied, "If that's the case, I know what must be done. But first, I will conduct my own investigation." With that, John stood, maintaining the decorum expected of a headmaster, and left Snape's office. Snape watched him go, his gaze lingering on John's right hand, which hung limply by his side. Something about it seemed to catch Snape's attention, sparking a mix of thoughts and suspicions, but he remained silent. Leaving Snape's office, John found himself deep in thought. Lupin, involved in a murder? He mused, stroking his chin. The contrast between the Lupin he knew and the one Snape described left John conflicted. He regretted not familiarizing himself more with the Harry Potter series before his time travel. Now, 11 years later, his memory was failing him. Complaining about his predicament, John lamented, can't even get a moment's peace during the holidays. Between Azkaban escapees, animagi, soul magic, dementors, and now a murder accusation, John's year had been anything but quiet. Seeking to heal his injured right hand, John made his way to the Room of Requirement and entered the Gryffindor Chamber of Secrets. There, he prepared a potion using unicorn horn, a rare ingredient. The potion, resembling milk, offered no taste to John, who downed it without hesitation, eager for any relief it could provide. His hand's tremors lessened, but he noted the dwindling supply of unicorn horn, a necessity not just for him, but for Nagini as well. Realizing he needed more, John decided to visit Hagrid, hoping the groundskeeper might have some unicorn horn stashed away. As he approached Hagrid's hut, he noticed a cat and a dog, Tom and Crookshanks, playing nearby. Not surprised by their presence, John was, however, taken aback by the sound of sobbing coming from inside the hut. Recognizing Hagrid's booming cries, John found himself wondering, why is Hagrid crying again? And then with a hint of amusement, wait, why did I say again? Steeling himself for whatever emotional turmoil awaited, John prepared to enter Hagrid's hut, ready to offer whatever support he could to his friend. It seems that Hagrid finds a reason to shed tears every year. In my first year, it was Norbert, the fire-breathing dragon, and in my second, Aragog, the acromantula. I wonder, who will be the cause this year? Fueled by curiosity, I leaned forward and knocked on the wooden door. The sound of heavy footsteps approached swiftly, and with a creak, the door swung open to reveal Hagrid. He stood there, clutching a pink handkerchief, his face a mess of snot and tears. Despite his rugged exterior, Hagrid had the heart of a gentle giant. "John, have you heard?" Hagrid's voice broke as he saw me, and he enveloped me in a bear hug that made my ribs creak in protest. "Hagrid, please, let me go," I gasped, struggling for air. 3 years had passed, 3 whole years, I okayed at Hagrid with a mix of desperation and resignation. Despite dedicating myself to physical training all year, I still felt utterly fragile in Hagrid's embrace. It made me question, is all my hard work futile when faced with Hagrid's natural strength? Hagrid's tendency to wear his heart on his sleeve, coupled with his immense physical strength, often put me in these awkward, albeit endearing situations. It was a reminder of the unique bonds formed within the walls of Hogwarts, bonds that were as diverse and complex as the magical world itself. Chapter 140. Angry Harry and Weeping Hagrid. In the Gryffindor common room, Harry found himself unable to sleep. The trip to Hogsmeade, which had started on a high note, ended with a revelation that left him reeling. He had learned of the ultimate betrayal. His parents were sold out by none other than Sirius Black, his godfather. This title, both unfamiliar and deeply personal, sent Harry into a state of shock. Sirius Black, his father's best friend and most trusted ally, had turned against them, leading to the death of his parents. The mix of emotions was overwhelming. Anger coursed through Harry at the thought of the man responsible for his parents' death. Resentment bubbled up for the trust his father placed in Sirius, only to be betrayed. Fear gripped him at the realization that Sirius had escaped Azkaban, removing the last barrier to Voldemort's return. And beneath it all was a profound sadness at the thought of his parents' trust being shattered by someone they held dear. These emotions churned within Harry like a storm, each thought of Sirius Black fueling his hatred further. He envisioned Sirius laughing in the darkness, mocking him. The memory of how Sirius allegedly killed Peter Pettigrew, another of his father's friends, played in his mind alongside the haunting words claiming success in betraying the Potters. The final moments of his parents' lives, their resistance and pleas, haunted him, ending in the green flash that took them away. Revenge became a singular focus, a concept that seemed both inevitable and justified in Harry's mind. He imagined himself, fueled by vengeance, confronting Sirius. Despite not possessing the same strength as his imagined ally John, Harry felt a courageous heart within him, unafraid of death. As dawn broke, Harry was unsure if he had slept at all. His appearance was haggard, his aura intimidating. Upon leaving his bedroom, he found Ron and Hermione, who were taken aback by his state. "Harry, you look terrible," Hermione said, her concern evident. She knew the gravity of discovering one's enemy to be a godfather and the turmoil it must cause. Harry, snapping back to the present, asked about the whereabouts of everyone else. Ron reminded him of the holiday's start, suggesting it was time for lunch. As they prepared to leave, Hermione attempted to address the elephant in the room. She knew Harry well enough to recognize the look of vengeance in his eyes. She and Ron implored Harry not to do anything rash, like seeking out Sirius Black. The risk was too great, not just the danger of facing Black, but the consequences of such actions, which could lead to imprisonment in Azkaban. Harry understood the logic, but the thought of letting his parents' betrayer go unpunished was unbearable. His friend's concern was palpable, but the path forward seemed fraught with danger and uncertainty. Outside, the air was cold, and the atmosphere was heavy with a sense of foreboding. The heart of the conversation was being gnawed at by the harsh reality of their situation, much like being bitten by relentless insects with jagged mouths. "You know what I see and hear every time a Dementor gets too close?" Harry's voice, tinged with anger and a deeper hoarseness than usual, broke the silence. "I hear my mother screaming, begging Voldemort for mercy. If you had heard your mother's scream before she was killed, you would never be able to forget it." "There's nothing you can do," Hermione interjected, her voice laced with panic. "I know," Harry retorted angrily, "but you want me to just stand by and do nothing." The conversation abruptly fell silent. Harry watched as Hermione opened her mouth to speak, her eyes darkening with emotion. "I'm sorry, Hermione. I just can't stop thinking about him. And what exactly do you plan to do when you find him?" Ron asked, his voice shaky and nervous. "You're not thinking of killing Black, are you?" Harry remained silent, prompting Hermione to quickly jump in. "Don't be ridiculous. Harry doesn't want to kill anyone, right, Harry?" She was desperate for Harry to see reason, but Harry's silence was unyielding. In an attempt to lighten the mood, Ron suggested they visit Hagrid. It's Christmas, after all. He'd probably appreciate some company. Hermione shot him a look that could only be described as incredulous, as if to say, "Are you out of your mind? It's too dangerous outside. What if Harry runs into Black?" Despite the risks, Harry agreed to go without hesitation. Unable to dissuade him, Hermione and Ron resigned themselves to accompany him, both worried yet hopeful that the visit might lift Harry's spirits. As they made their way, the snow began to fall more heavily, quickly blanketing the ground in a thick layer of white. Upon reaching Hagrid's hut, they found John lost in thought, staring at a letter from the Ministry of Magic. "Why does it feel like Buckbeak's head is on the chopping block?" John mused aloud, recalling a scene from the movie that seemed to mirror their current predicament. Hagrid, overhearing the comment, let out a howl of despair so loud it seemed to shake the very walls of the hut. John, envious of Hagrid's physical strength and booming voice, tried to offer some comfort, albeit awkwardly due to their size difference. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. John, fearing for the safety of the visitors due to Hagrid's distraught state, hastily warned him to be gentle. Thankfully, Hagrid heeded the warning, though his greeting still left Harry, Hermione, and Ron momentarily stunned. As they settled in, Hagrid, overwhelmed by emotion, began to cry uncontrollably. John, attempting to calm his own nerves, nearly caused a disaster with the teacup and table due to the hut's shaky structure. Harry, puzzled by Hagrid's distress, was directed by John to read the letter on the table. "We accept Professor Dumbledore's assurance that you were not responsible for this regrettable incident," Harry read aloud, confused. "Isn't this good news?" John urged him to continue reading. Upon learning of Buckbeak's impending trial by the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures, Harry was baffled. Why is this worth crying over? It's just a trial. Hagrid, barely able to speak through his sobs, managed to say, "You don't understand. Those people from the committee, they only deal with creatures they find amusing." At that moment, the stark reality of the situation was underscored by the sight of Buckbeak noisily chewing on bloody food in the corner of the room, a grim contrast to Hagrid's words. John was at a loss for words, realizing that in Hagrid's eyes, any creature that didn't pose a direct threat to him was considered fun. The three friends shared a look of understanding. Hermione, moved by the scene, approached Hagrid to offer some comfort, her earlier frustration forgotten in the face of his genuine distress. Hagrid's distress over Buckbeak's situation deeply affected everyone present, including Harry. Despite their initial expectations for Harry to confront Hagrid about not disclosing the truth regarding Sirius Black, Ron and Hermione observed that Harry couldn't bring himself to do it. Hagrid had always been a father figure to Harry, making it impossible for Harry to express any resentment towards him. The atmosphere was heavy with Hagrid's despair, believing that any defense for Buckbeak would be futile, envisioning the grim fate of his beloved creature. The sadness and fear that enveloped the gentle giant were palpable. John attempted to eat a rock cake, but its hardness and lack of flavor made him grimace in distaste. Seeking to shift the mood, he asked, "What did Dumbledore say, Hagrid?" Hagrid, momentarily pausing his tears, replied, "He's already done so much for me. With everything on his plate, Dementors, Aurors, and Sirius Black, it's just—" His voice trailed off into a whimper, the sorrow resurfacing as he lamented, "My poor Buckbeak." "There might be other ways to handle this," John interjected, hoping to inject a note of optimism into the conversation. All eyes turned towards him, and just as he was about to offer a reassuring smile, a sudden realization hit him. John had a minor issue with his right hand, which under normal circumstances wouldn't have been a concern. However, the situation was made awkward by the fact that John, known for his alias Johnny Silver, relied on his right hand for writing. This personal challenge added an unexpected layer to the already complex situation, highlighting the vulnerabilities and imperfections that everyone, regardless of their strengths, must navigate.